The morning sun glinted off the desert-tan armor of the M1A1 Abrams as Colonel Thomas Iron Horse Harrington ran his weathered hand across his flank. At 58, the retired tank commander still moved with the purpose of a soldier, though time had softened his once rigid posture. Here at Fort Knox's Patton Museum, surrounded by the steel beasts that had defined his life, he felt most at home. This particular Abrams had been restored to its Desert Storm configuration, complete with the unit markings of the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. Harrington paused at the commander's hatch, closed his eyes, and was instantly transported back to February 26, 1991. The sandstorm had finally cleared, revealing the vast expanse of Iraqi desert. Through his thermal sights, Harrington spotted the T-72 tanks of the Republican Guard, positioned in defensive formations. What followed would become legend in armored warfare. Eagle Troop, 2nd Squadron, engaging and destroying 28 Iraqi tanks without a single American loss. "Colonel Harrington?" The voice pulled him back to the present. A young museum guide stood respectfully nearby. "Sorry to disturb you, sir. There's a group of ROTC cadets who recognized you. They were hoping you might say a few words about Desert Storm." 20 minutes later, surrounded by fresh-faced cadets, Harrington pointed to the Abrams he'd been remembering. This machine and the men who crewed it changed modern warfare at the Battle of 73 Easting. Our 9 tanks destroyed 28 Iraqi tanks and dozens of other vehicles without losing a single American tank. It wasn't about superior numbers. It was about superior training, technology, and tactics. A cadet raised his hand. "Sir, what about drones? Aren't they making tanks obsolete?" The question hit Harrington like an unexpected round. It was an argument he'd heard with increasing frequency, usually from Pentagon officials who'd never felt the earth shake beneath 35 tons of American steel. "Son, people have been predicting the death of the tank since the first anti-tank weapon was invented. But here's what those predictions miss. Warfare isn't about a single technology. It's about combined arms and controlling terrain. And nothing controls terrain like boots on the ground supported by armor." He patted the hull of the Abrams. "This tank can operate in conditions that ground drones, survive hits that would obliterate unmanned vehicles, and deliver precise firepower exactly when needed. Most importantly, it has 4 American soldiers making split-second decisions based on what they see and feel on the battlefield." The cadets nodded, but Harrington saw uncertainty in their eyes. They'd grown up watching drone footage on CNN, precision strikes executed by operators thousands of miles away. As the tour moved on, his phone vibrated. The screen showed his son's name, James Harrington, currently deployed as a first lieutenant with the 1st Armored Division in Afghanistan. "James, everything all right, son?" "Hey, Dad?" The connection was surprisingly clear. "Just thought you should know what's coming down the pipeline." Harrington moved away from the tour group, finding a quiet spot beside a Sherman tank. "What's happening?" "The brass is talking major restructuring, cutting armor battalions by 30% over the next 5 years. Shifting funding to drone programs and cyber." Harrington felt his jaw tighten. "They're making a mistake." "That's not all. They've mothballed our modernization program. The Abrams upgrade has been shelved indefinitely." "Damn fools," Harrington muttered. "They think because UAVs can knock out a few technicals in uncontested airspace, they can replace combined arms doctrine that's been proven over a century." "I know, Dad. Thought you'd want to know. I've got to run. Heading out on patrol in 20. Stay safe, son. Keep your head on a swivel." "Always do. Love you, Dad." When he arrived home that evening, Harrington found an official envelope bearing the Department of Defense seal in his mailbox. Inside was a letter requesting his participation as a tactical consultant for a classified defense initiative. It was signed by General Howard Maxwell, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Harrington's former commander during Desert Storm. 3 days later, Harrington sat in a secure conference room deep within the Pentagon. The room was filled with military officers and civilian contractors led by General Maxwell. "Gentlemen and ladies," Maxwell began, "what you're about to see is classified at the highest level." The lights dimmed and a screen descended. The footage showed a desert landscape reminiscent of Afghanistan. A column of 3 Abrams tanks moved along a wadi, commanders visible in their hatches. "This was recorded 6 months ago during a classified operation," Maxwell narrated. Small objects appeared in the sky above the tanks, moving with surprising speed. Before the tank commanders could react, precision munitions struck each vehicle in rapid succession. The lead tank's ammunition compartment detonated, sending its turret cartwheeling into the air. The others were immobilized, smoke pouring from their engine compartments. Loitering munitions, Harrington murmured. Suicide drones. Correct, Maxwell confirmed, but not like any we've encountered before. A second wave descended, targeting the tank's tracks and rear compartments with surgical precision. The lead tank stopped moving. Then the second. The third attempted to reverse but was quickly immobilized. The footage showed crew members attempting to evacuate. The drones, apparently anticipating this, had held a reserve force. As soon as the hatches opened, they struck. 3 tanks destroyed, 7 KIA, 5 wounded, Maxwell said quietly. The official report attributed it to IEDs. The truth has been compartmentalized. Why show me this? Harrington asked, his voice tight. Maxwell gestured, and a technical diagram appeared on the screen. Because this wasn't a one-off attack. Similar drone swarm technology is proliferating. China, Russia, even non-state actors are developing these capabilities. Conventional armored warfare as we've known it is facing an existential threat. Harrington absorbed this, his mind racing through countermeasures. Active protection systems should intercept these. Trophy, Iron Fist, we've had the technology for years. Those systems are designed for RPGs and anti-tank missiles. They struggle with multiple small targets attacking from all directions simultaneously. So improve them, Harrington countered. That's an engineering problem, not a reason to abandon tanks. Maxwell smiled thinly. That's exactly why you're here. He nodded to an aide who changed the display to show a new vehicle design. This is Project Iron Shield. The schematic showed what appeared to be a modified Abrams, but with significant differences. No crew compartment, a lower profile, multiple weapon systems across the hull, including anti-aircraft capabilities. An unmanned ground vehicle, Harrington said, studying the design. Remote-controlled? Initially, yes, eventually autonomous, designed specifically to counter aerial threats while maintaining ground combat capabilities. Harrington leaned back, crossing his arms. You're talking about replacing tanks with drones to fight other drones. I'm talking about keeping American soldiers alive, Maxwell replied sharply. Those men you saw had no chance. Their training, courage, and experience meant nothing against an enemy they couldn't effectively target. The statement hung in the air. Harrington couldn't argue with the footage, yet something about this approach felt fundamentally wrong. General, removing humans from the battlefield creates its own problems. Systems fail. Communications get jammed. Sometimes you need eyes on target that no sensor can replace. Which is why we want you on this project, Maxwell said. We need people who understand armored warfare at a bone-deep level. People who can help bridge the gap between traditional tactics and emerging technologies. Maxwell introduced the core team. Dr. Catherine Wright, Chief Technical Officer, Major Eric Santiago, Liaison with Army Futures Command, and Dr. Robert Chen, AI Specialist. We're offering you a position as Senior Tactical Advisor to Project Iron Shield, Maxwell concluded. Harrington considered the offer. The pay would be substantial. And if tanks were truly facing extinction, perhaps this was a way to preserve some of their legacy. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being asked to help design the replacement for soldiers like his son. I need time to think about this, he said. Of course. But I should mention that this project is moving forward with or without you. We'd rather have your experience guiding us than proceeding without it. I understand. You'll have my answer within 48 hours. As Harrington rose to leave, Maxwell added, One more thing, Colonel. Your son, Lieutenant James Harrington, he's with the 1st Armored in Afghanistan, correct? Harrington froze. He is. I'll make sure his unit is prioritized for the latest countermeasures against these drone threats. Whatever your decision. The statement wasn't quite a bribe, nor exactly a threat, but it hung in the air with unmistakable weight. That evening, Dr. Chen contacted Harrington, suggesting an unofficial meeting. At the hotel bar, the scientist spoke candidly. Project Iron Shield isn't just about countering drone threats. It's about fundamentally changing how the U.S. military fights ground wars. Chen's eyes behind rimless glasses were intense. The push toward unmanned systems is happening at every level, and it's happening fast. Because of incidents like the one in the video? That's part of it. The other part is political. Congress doesn't like casualties. Unmanned systems promise the same military effectiveness without the body bags coming home. Chen glanced around before continuing. But there's more. Nexus Defense Solutions, the company developing most of the drone technology for Iron Shield, has been pushing this agenda for years. Their CEO is former CIA with connections throughout the defense establishment. He stands to make billions if the military fully commits to his vision. Are you suggesting improper influence? Harrington asked carefully. I'm suggesting the decision to move away from manned tanks wasn't made purely on tactical grounds. There are powerful interests who benefit from this shift. Chen leaned forward. The threat is real, but there are multiple ways to address it, and we're being pushed hard toward one particular solution. Why tell me this? Chen studied Harrington thoughtfully. Because I've read your service record. You're the officer who refused a direct order during Desert Storm because you knew the terrain better than headquarters did. You saved your entire company by making that call. Harrington remembered the incident well, disobeying orders to advance along a predetermined route, choosing instead to swing wide around a ridge where Iraqi forces waited in ambush. He'd been right. The decision earned him a reprimand followed by a silver star. We need someone who understands that machines and algorithms don't have all the answers. Someone who values human judgment. Chen finished his drink. Someone who might push back against turning warfare into a video game. By morning, Harrington had made his decision. He would join the project not to help obsolete the tanks he loved, but to ensure whatever came next preserved the principles he believed in: human judgment, tactical flexibility, and the intangible qualities that separated great soldiers from merely competent ones. 2 weeks later, Harrington arrived at a nondescript facility in the Arizona desert, 50 miles from Tucson. Dr. Wright met him in the lobby, professional in a blazer despite the heat. Colonel Harrington, and welcome to Project Iron Shield. Let's get you processed, and then I'll show you around. The security protocols were extensive. By the time they finished, Harrington had signed enough forms to develop writer's cramp and received a badge granting him access to most of the facility. Wright led him through a set of double doors into what resembled NASA's mission control. Multiple workstations faced a wall of screens displaying data feeds, maps, and video from test ranges. Impressive, Harrington acknowledged. We run simulations and field tests from here, Catherine explained. The facility includes a 10-square-mile test range for realistic conditions. Through another set of doors was a cavernous space containing 3 vehicles that resembled Abrams tanks, but with significant differences. Lower profiles, no crew hatches, multiple weapon systems across the halls. The SG-1 prototype series, Catherine said with unmistakable pride. Sentinel ground combat system, though everyone just calls them Sentinels. Harrington approached the nearest vehicle. The main gun was smaller than an Abrams 100mm cannon, supplemented by what looked like automated 30mm chain guns and missile launchers. No crew compartment at all, he asked, circling the vehicle. None. Everything is either remotely operated or handled by the onboard AI. Power plant? Hybrid system. Conventional turbines supplemented by advanced batteries. Quieter than the Abrams, longer operational range, and reduced heat signature. Armor package? Composite like the Abrams, but without the need to protect human occupants. We've redistributed weight to critical systems. It's actually better protected in key areas while being about 20% lighter overall. A team of engineers worked on one of the prototypes, panels open to expose the complex systems within. Where do I fit into all this? Harrington asked. You'll work primarily with the tactical development team. Your experience will help refine the AI's decision-making processes, especially for anti-drone operations. Later that day, during a project briefing, Harrington learned that Iron Shield was competing with a similar program from Nexus Defense called the XM-1 Gladiator. Congressional funding decisions would likely depend on comparative performance in upcoming joint exercises. Major Santiago emphasized the urgency of the project. Intelligence suggests drone swarms are being mass-produced now. Every day we delay potentially costs lives. With respect, Major, Harrington replied, rushing an inadequately tested system into combat could cost even more. That evening, Harrington received a call from James. The satellite connection was poor, but the message came through clearly enough. Dad, we've been attacked. Firebase Condor, heavy casualties. Cold dread settled in Harrington's stomach. What happened? Drone swarm came out of nowhere, targeted our vehicles first. 4 tanks disabled, 7 KIA, more wounded. The connection deteriorated further. They knew exactly weak points, jammed our comms. James, Harrington called, his knuckles white around the phone. Where are you now? Are you safe? In the Tioki, calling for air support. Dad, these weren't regular insurgent drones. Advanced targeting. Never seen anything like it. An explosion sounded in the background. Gotta go. Love you. The line went dead. Harrington immediately contacted General Maxwell, who confirmed the attack. CENTCOM reports a major attack on Firebase Condor beginning approximately 40 minutes ago. Multiple drones employing advanced targeting capabilities against armored vehicles. Air support has been dispatched, but is still 15 minutes out. James is my son, Howard, Harrington said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. But there are dozens of American soldiers at that firebase. If this is the same technology we're developing countermeasures against, we need to accelerate immediately. Agreed. I'll arrange emergency transport for you back to Aberdeen tonight. We're convening a crisis response team to analyze the attack. Maxwell paused. Tom, I know this is personal for you, but we need your professional expertise now more than ever. That night, Harrington received a text from an unknown international number. Dad, we're secure. Air support arrived. Attack repelled. 8 KIA, 14 WIA. I'm okay. Limited comms. We'll call when possible. Love you. Relief washed over him, tempered by the knowledge that 8 American families would soon receive the worst possible news. 8 men and women who had gone to Afghanistan to serve their country would be coming home in flag-draped coffins. The attack on Firebase Condor would later be recognized as a turning point in modern warfare, when autonomous systems decisively entered the battlefield, not as experimental curiosities, but as lethal game-changers. For Harrington, it marked the beginning of his most important mission, ensuring that in the rush to embrace these new technologies, America did not lose sight of the human values and warrior ethos that had defined its military excellence for generations. Chapter 2, The Last Generation. The next day, Harrington learned that the timeline for Iron Shield had been accelerated dramatically. Instead of a limited field test with 2 units, the Pentagon now wanted 10 operational Sentinels in 6 months. That's unrealistic, Harrington told Santiago. We've barely begun comprehensive testing. The AI needs thousands more training iterations before it's ready for deployment. I don't disagree, Colonel, but the decision has been made at levels far above us. Santiago lowered his voice. Intelligence reports indicate Russian and Chinese UGV programs are advancing rapidly. There's pressure to establish technological dominance before they can field competing systems. That afternoon, Dr. Chen shared disturbing news. Someone had attempted to access classified project data using Harrington's credentials. This wasn't random, Chen explained. It was a sophisticated effort targeting specific files related to the code modifications we discovered in the demonstration systems. Someone knows we're asking questions, Harrington concluded. Precisely. And they're attempting to identify how much we know. Chen's expression was grave. Colonel, this significantly escalates the situation. We're no longer merely questioning technical decisions. We're potentially confronting deliberate deception at a high level. Harrington's concerns grew when his old friend Johnny Martinez, who he'd invited as a technical consultant, reported that someone claiming to be from the Defense Contract Management Agency had visited his auto repair shop, asking pointed questions about his finances and military service. Except DCMA doesn't have any open contracts involving my business, Martinez told him. Miguel checked after they left. This is a false flag operation, Colonel. Harrington nodded grimly. Consistent with the attempt to access my credentials. Someone is concerned enough about our involvement to take active countermeasures. They decided to approach Dr. Wright with their concerns, presenting evidence of irregularities in the demonstration data and suspicious incidents surrounding their investigation. To their relief, Wright was equally troubled by their findings. If the Sentinel program has been compromised, as you suggest, our mission is at risk. She straightened. Decision made. I'll help you, but we must proceed with extreme caution. The forces potentially arrayed against us are formidable. The following week, James called with news that his unit was receiving enhanced countermeasures for their tanks. Whatever strings you pulled, Dad, they're working. This is serious gear, stuff we haven't seen before. Should help against the drone threat. Harrington felt conflicted. He was relieved that James's unit was receiving better protection, but concerned about the implicit quid pro quo. Had Maxwell expedited those countermeasures specifically because Harrington had joined Iron Shield? And if so, what expectations came with that favor? The technical work accelerated as the team prepared for a crucial demonstration before the Joint Chiefs and congressional representatives. Harrington and Martinez focused on training the Sentinel's AI using what Chen called experience-based learning, using their actual combat experiences to develop the system's tactical decision-making. We're not trying to make the AI think like humans, Chen explained. That's impossible. but we can teach it to recognize patterns and make decisions based on the collective wisdom of experienced tank commanders. The approach showed promise, but challenges remained. The AI excelled at defined tasks but struggled with ambiguity. It could identify and engage enemy vehicles with remarkable precision, but had difficulty distinguishing between combatants and civilians in complex scenarios. This is the fundamental problem, Harrington told the team during a late-night session. In combat, the hardest decisions aren't about ballistics or tactics. They're moral judgments made in split seconds with incomplete information. Can we really program that? Not perfectly, Chen acknowledged, but we can establish ethical frameworks and decision trees that approximate human judgment in most situations. 3 days before the crucial demonstration, disaster struck. During a field test, one of the Sentinel prototypes suffered a catastrophic failure in its targeting systems, firing on a simulated civilian target that it had correctly identified moments earlier. What happened? Harrington demanded as the team reviewed the data. The AI made the right identification but executed the wrong action, Chen explained, her expression troubled. It's as if the decision pathway was corrupted between assessment and execution. Wright ordered a complete system review, which revealed a disturbing discovery. Subtle code modifications had been introduced into the Sentinel's targeting protocols. These changes wouldn't be apparent under normal operations, but could trigger catastrophic failures under specific conditions. This wasn't an accident, Wright concluded. Someone deliberately sabotaged the system to fail during the demonstration. Nexus defense, Martinez suggested, trying to ensure their gladiator looks superior by comparison? Possibly, Chen replied, but it would require insider access to our systems, someone with high-level clearance and intimate knowledge of our code architecture. The revelation cast a shadow of suspicion over the entire project team. Maxwell ordered enhanced security protocols and a counterintelligence investigation. But with the demonstration approaching, there wasn't time for a comprehensive security review. We proceed as planned, Maxwell instructed, but we implement Dr. Chen's backup AI core, the one developed independently on the secure server. Harrington remained troubled. If there's a saboteur with access to our systems, they could still cause problems during the demonstration. That's why you'll be monitoring the operation personally, Colonel, but Maxwell replied. Your experience might help identify any anomalies before they become catastrophic. The morning of the demonstration dawned clear and cold. Military leaders and congressional representatives gathered at the Aberdeen test range, where both the Sentinel and its competitor, Nexus Defense's Gladiator, would showcase their capabilities against simulated drone threats. Harrington and Martinez monitored from the command center, watching as the Sentinel powered up and began the demonstration sequence. Initially, everything proceeded perfectly. The system detected and engaged simulated drone threats with impressive precision, showcasing the tactical knowledge it had learned from the veteran tank commanders. Phase 1 complete, all targets neutralized, the test controller announced. Proceeding to Phase 2, swarm defense. Multiple drone targets appeared simultaneously, approaching from different vectors. The Sentinel adjusted its position, using terrain features for partial cover, while maintaining firing solutions on the highest priority threats. She's performing beautifully, Martinez murmured, just like we taught her. But as Phase 3 began, simulating electronic warfare conditions, Harrington noticed something concerning. The Sentinel's movement patterns changed subtly, becoming less fluid, more hesitant. Something's wrong, he said, pointing to a diagnostic display. Power fluctuations in the targeting systems. It's similar to what happened during the failed test. Chen immediately began running diagnostics. You're right, there's an anomalous code sequence executing in the targeting architecture. It's not in the backup AI core, it's being injected from somewhere else. Can you block it? Wright asked urgently. Trying, but I need to identify the source. Chen's fingers flew across the keyboard. Someone's accessing the system remotely, using credentials that should have been disabled. Martinez pointed to another display. Look at the Gladiator. It's performing flawlessly under the same conditions that are degrading our system. Because they knew exactly what was coming, Harrington realized. They're not just sabotaging our demonstration, they're enhancing their own performance by preparing specifically for these scenarios. Got it? Chen announced triumphantly. Remote access through a maintenance port that should be inactive. Blocking now. The Sentinel's performance immediately stabilized, but valuable time had been lost. The congressional delegation had already seen the system's apparent struggle, compared to the Gladiator's smooth operation. As the demonstration concluded, Maxwell approached Harrington, his expression grim. The delegation was impressed with both systems, but the Gladiator clearly outperformed the Sentinel during the electronic warfare phase. We're going to lose the contract unless we can prove tampering. Dr. Chen has the evidence, Harrington replied. Remote access during the demonstration, using credentials that should have been disabled. That helps, but we need more. We need to identify who's behind this. Maxwell lowered his voice. The Nexus CEO is meeting with key committee members tonight. If we don't counter their narrative by morning, the funding decision is as good as made. That evening, working from a secure facility, Chen made a breakthrough. I've traced the credentials used to access our system during the demonstration. They belong to Dr. Alan Richards, one of our former software engineers who left the project 3 months ago to work for Nexus Defense. That's it, Martinez said. The smoking gun. They hired him for his inside knowledge of our systems. It's more complicated than that, Wright cautioned. Richard's credentials should have been deactivated when he left. Someone with current administrative access had to have reactivated them specifically for this purpose. The implication was clear. The saboteur wasn't just at Nexus. They were still on the Iron Shield team, someone with high-level access and the trust of project leadership. As they worked to identify the traitor, James called with disturbing news from Afghanistan. Dad, we're seeing a new type of drone here, more advanced than what hit us at Condor. Intelligence thinks they're testing upgraded versions in preparation for something bigger. Do the new countermeasures help? Harrington asked. Somewhat, but these things are adaptive. They learn from each engagement, changing tactics to exploit weaknesses. James paused. Word is they're hitting another FOB tomorrow. We're being deployed as reinforcements. The call ended with Harrington more determined than ever to resolve the sabotage issue and get effective countermeasures into the field. The stakes weren't just a defense contract, they were American lives. Working through the night, Chen and Wright systematically analyzed access logs and code modifications. By dawn, they had their answer. Major Santiago, Wright said, showing Harrington the evidence. He's been working with Nexus from the beginning. His credentials were used to reactivate Richard's access, and he made subtle modifications to our test parameters that ensured the Sentinel would struggle during the demonstration. Harrington felt a cold anger. Santiago had been their military liaison, the face of Army Futures Command on the project. His betrayal endangered not just the program, but the troops who needed these countermeasures. Maxwell authorized Santiago's immediate arrest. When confronted with the evidence, the Major broke, admitting that Nexus had offered him a 7-figure position upon retirement in exchange for his assistance in securing the defense contract. What Santiago didn't know, Maxwell told Harrington afterward, was that Nexus had no intention of actually deploying their system. They wanted the contract, the billions in development funds, but their prototype is years from being field-ready. They've been staging elaborate demonstrations with remotely piloted vehicles, not true AI-driven systems. The revelation sent shockwaves through the defense establishment. The congressional delegation, presented with evidence of corporate espionage and contract fraud, unanimously authorized expedited funding for Iron Shield while launching an investigation into Nexus Defense. For Harrington, the victory was bittersweet. The system would move forward, but James and his unit were still in harm's way, facing advanced drone threats with limited countermeasures. 2 days later, as the team worked to recover from the sabotage and prepare for accelerated deployment, news came from Afghanistan that sent Harrington's world crashing down. Firebase Echo is under attack, Maxwell informed him, face ashen. James's unit was deployed there as reinforcements. We've lost communication with the base. For 6 agonizing hours, Harrington continued working, channeling his fear into productive effort on the Sentinel's tactical systems. If James survived, he would need the best possible protection against future attacks. If not, Harrington refused to complete the thought. Finally, Maxwell appeared at the laboratory door. We've reestablished contact with Echo. The attack was repelled, but casualties were heavy. James is alive, Tom, wounded but stable, being evacuated to Germany as we speak. Relief flooded through Harrington, followed by grim determination. The drone threat was evolving faster than conventional countermeasures could adapt. Iron Shield wasn't just a project anymore. It was a race against time to protect soldiers like James from an enemy that was growing more sophisticated with each engagement. What's the new timeline? He asked Wright. First operational unit in 4 months. Full deployment of 10 units in 6. Not fast enough, Harrington decided. We need to get at least one prototype into the field for real-world testing within 60 days. Even if it's not perfect, it can gather data and provide some protection. That's extremely aggressive, Colonel, Chen cautioned. The ethical frameworks for autonomous targeting decisions alone require months of verification. Then we deploy it in remote operation mode initially, human operators making the critical decisions until the AI is fully validated. Harrington looked at the team gathered around him. People are dying while we perfect this system. We need to find the balance between caution and urgency. The team nodded in agreement. The path ahead was clear, if challenging. Accelerate development while maintaining essential safeguards. Get operational prototypes into the field quickly, and iterate based on real-world performance. As they dispersed to their tasks, Harrington found a moment to call the military hospital in Germany, where James was recovering. Despite the pain medication evident in his slurred speech, James was already focused on returning to his unit. "The new drones are something else, Dad," he said. "They're learning from each engagement, adapting their tactics. Conventional countermeasures won't cut it much longer." "I know, son. We're working on something that will. Just focus on getting better." "Will do. And Dad, whatever you're building, make sure it has some human oversight. We had a drone target a medical evacuation because it couldn't distinguish between a stretcher and a weapon. Some decisions need human eyes." "I couldn't agree more," Harrington replied, more convinced than ever that he was on the right path. The next morning, Harrington presented a revised development plan to Maxwell and the project leadership. "Iron Shield will deploy with 3 operational modes," he explained, "fully autonomous for clear-cut tactical situations, remote operation for complex environments, and a hybrid mode where the AI handles targeting and movement, but critical engagement decisions require human confirmation. The 3-tiered approach gives us flexibility while maintaining essential human judgment for the most challenging scenarios," Wright added. "We can deploy sooner while continuing to refine the autonomous capabilities." Maxwell nodded approval. "Make it happen. I'll secure the necessary authorizations for accelerated field deployment." As the team dispersed to implement the new plan, Harrington felt a sense of cautious optimism. The path ahead remained challenging, but they had overcome sabotage, exposed corruption, and developed a pragmatic approach that balanced technological innovation with human judgment. In his decades of military service, Harrington had learned that warfare was constantly evolving, requiring adaptation without abandoning proven principles. Iron Shield represented that balance, embracing autonomous technology while preserving the human decision-making that had defined American military excellence for generations. The steel beasts of tomorrow would be different from those Harrington had commanded in the deserts of Iraq, but their core purpose remained unchanged: protecting American troops and ensuring battlefield dominance against evolving threats. And if that required tanks without tankers, then the old soldier would ensure they carried forward the wisdom and values of those who had commanded their predecessors through the fog of war. Chapter 3: Brothers in Arms. 3 weeks later, Harrington stood in the control center at Aberdeen Proving Ground, watching as the first field-ready Sentinel prototype navigated a complex training course. Beside him, Martinez monitored the vehicle's mechanical systems, while Chen analyzed the AI's decision-making processes in real time. "She's performing beautifully," Martinez observed, using the feminine pronoun that had somehow become the team's standard reference for the Sentinel. "Power distribution is optimal. Suspension is adapting to terrain variations exactly as designed. Tactical decisions are similarly impressive," Chen added. "The AI is applying the combined experience patterns from all 4 of our veteran consultants, weighing options just as an experienced tank commander would." Harrington nodded, studying the multiple camera feeds showing the Sentinel's progress. The vehicle moved with surprising grace for its size, utilizing terrain features for cover while maintaining optimal firing positions against simulated drone threats. "What about the ethical frameworks?" he asked, still concerned about the system's ability to make appropriate decisions in morally ambiguous situations. "We've implemented the 3-tiered authentication system as you suggested," Wright replied. "Clear threats can be engaged autonomously. Ambiguous targets require remote operator approval, and any scenario involving potential civilian presence automatically defaults to non-engagement unless explicitly overridden by human command." The compromise satisfied Harrington's core concern, that machines alone shouldn't make life-or-death decisions when the situation involved moral judgment rather than purely tactical considerations. As the demonstration concluded successfully, Maxwell approached their station. Impressive progress. The Joint Chiefs are satisfied with the three-tiered approach. We have authorization for field deployment of 2 Sentinel prototypes to Afghanistan within 30 days. That's ambitious, Wright cautioned. We're still finalizing the secure communication systems for remote operation, which is why we're sending Harrington and Martinez to oversee the deployment personally, Maxwell replied. Their experience will be invaluable during the initial field operations, and they can provide real-time feedback for ongoing development. Harrington felt a surge of mixed emotions. Returning to a combat zone at his age wasn't something he'd anticipated, but the opportunity to directly protect troops like James, who was still recovering in Germany, provided powerful motivation. Martinez grinned. Back to the sandbox, Colonel? Just like old times. Not quite like old times, Harrington replied, glancing at the Sentinel on the test range. But the mission remains the same. Keep our people alive and complete the objective. Over the next 3 weeks, final preparations for field deployment consumed every waking hour. The 2 Sentinel prototypes designated for Afghanistan underwent exhaustive testing, while Harrington and Martinez received updated combat training and theater-specific briefings. The night before their deployment, Harrington received a call from James, now recovered enough to speak clearly. Heard a rumor you're heading our way, Dad, with some new hardware. News travels fast, Harrington observed, surprised that word had reached his son. The tanker grapevine is still efficient. James paused. Is it true? Are you really coming to Afghanistan? For a limited deployment, overseeing the field testing of a new system. James was quiet for a moment. Must be important if they're sending a retired colonel to a combat zone. Just be careful, okay? The rules are different now than in your day. These drone operators don't fight fair. Neither do we, son. Not anymore. Harrington thought of the Sentinels, packed and ready for transport. We're bringing some new rules to the game. The flight to Bagram Air Base took 14 hours, with the Sentinel prototypes following in massive C-17 transport aircraft. Upon arrival, Harrington and Martinez were immediately whisked to a classified briefing with theater commanders. The situation has escalated since Firebase Echo, the intelligence officer explained, displaying drone footage of recent attacks. We're now seeing coordinated swarm tactics targeting multiple assets simultaneously. Conventional countermeasures are increasingly ineffective. What about the enhanced systems provided to frontline units? Harrington asked, thinking of the equipment James had mentioned. Effective initially, but the enemy has already adapted. These drones appear to be learning from each engagement, adjusting their attack patterns to exploit weaknesses. The officer's expression was grim. We lose this adaptation race without a game-changing technology. That's why we're here, Martinez interjected. Iron Shield was specifically designed to counter evolving drone threats, with both active and passive defense systems. The briefing concluded with operational details. The Sentinels would deploy to Firebase Condor, rebuilt after the earlier attack, where they would operate under Harrington's direct command in defensive and limited patrol operations. 3 days later, as dawn broke over the Afghan mountains, Harrington stood atop an observation post at Firebase Condor, watching as the 2 Sentinel prototypes were unloaded from their transport vehicles. Despite their desert camouflage, the vehicles' distinctive profiles immediately attracted attention from the base personnel, who gathered at a respectful distance to observe these unfamiliar machines. A young captain approached, saluting. Captain Michael Rodriguez, sir, I'll be your liaison with base operations. Harrington returned the salute. Colonel Harrington, this is Chief Warrant Officer Martinez, our technical specialist. Rodriguez gestured toward the curious onlookers. The men are calling them ghost tanks. Word travels fast when something new arrives. They're not exactly tanks, Martinez corrected. Autonomous ground combat systems designed specifically for counter-drone operations. Rodriguez's expression reflected the same skepticism Harrington had initially felt about the project. No crew at all, sir? They operate in 3 modes, Harrington explained. Fully autonomous for clear tactical situations, remote operation for complex environments, and a hybrid mode where targeting is automated but engagement decisions require human confirmation. With all due respect, sir, we've seen what happens when technology fails out here. When communications go down or systems glitch, people die. Which is why we're here personally, Captain, Harrington replied. These are prototypes. We're not replacing your tanks. We're supplementing them with systems specifically designed to counter the drone threat that conventional armor struggles against. The captain nodded, not entirely convinced but willing to reserve judgment. Fair enough, sir. The men will appreciate anything that helps against those drones. We lost good people in the last attack. As Rodriguez led them to their assigned quarters, Martinez murmured, "Tough crowd." "As they should be," Harrington replied. "They've been fighting this war for years with mixed results. Technology that looks impressive in test environments doesn't always translate to battlefield effectiveness." "Then we'll just have to show them what Sentinel can really do," Martinez said with characteristic confidence. The opportunity came sooner than expected. That night, perimeter sensors detected multiple aerial contacts approaching from the northeast, a drone swarm similar to the one that had devastated the base months earlier. Harrington and Martinez rushed to the hastily established control center, where they found Rodriguez already coordinating defensive measures. "Approximately 20 contacts, moving fast and low," the captain reported. "Conventional air defense is tracking, but hasn't engaged yet." "Time to see what Sentinel can do," Harrington decided, activating the command systems. "Deploy both units to the northeast perimeter, hybrid operation mode." On the monitors, they watched as the two Sentinels powered up and moved into position with mechanical precision. Their sensor arrays immediately began tracking the incoming threats, identifying each drone and assigning threat levels based on movement patterns and weapon signatures. "Remarkable target acquisition," Rodriguez observed, professional interest overcoming his initial skepticism. "Wait until you see the countermeasures," Martinez replied with a hint of pride. The lead Sentinel positioned itself on elevated ground, maximizing sensor coverage, while the second took a complementary position that created overlapping fields of fire. Both vehicles powered up their active defense systems, a combination of electronic warfare measures and kinetic interceptors designed specifically for drone threats. "They're operating as a coordinated team," Harrington explained, sharing sensor data and dividing the battle space for optimal coverage. As the drone swarm came within range, the Sentinels executed their defense protocols. Electronic countermeasures disrupted control signals to several drones, causing them to hover aimlessly. Others were targeted by precise bursts from the 30mm chain guns, designed to minimize ammunition expenditure while ensuring target neutralization. "Impressive," Rodriguez acknowledged, as the monitors showed drone after drone falling from the sky without a single one penetrating the defensive perimeter. The entire engagement lasted less than 10 minutes. Of the 20 drones that had approached the base, 18 were neutralized. The remaining 2 retreated beyond sensor range, apparently responding to a recall command when the attack failed. "No casualties, no damage to base infrastructure," Martinez summarized triumphantly. "That's what Iron Shield was designed to do." Rodriguez studied the after-action data with growing appreciation. The coordination between units, the precision targeting, it's unlike anything we've deployed before. He looked at Harrington with newfound respect. "You may be onto something with these ghost tanks, sir." Over the next 2 weeks, the Sentinels proved their worth repeatedly. 3 more drone attacks were repelled with similar efficiency, and the systems demonstrated impressive adaptability to the evolving threat. After each engagement, Chen and her team back at Aberdeen analyzed the combat data, refining the AI's tactical responses and updating the systems remotely. Harrington observed these operations with a growing sense of cautious optimism. The technology was performing beyond expectations in its primary role, providing the defensive capability that conventional forces had lacked against the drone threat. Yet questions remained about its broader battlefield utility and the ethical frameworks governing autonomous operations. The true test came unexpectedly during a routine patrol. Harrington had authorized a limited reconnaissance mission, with one Sentinel operating in remote mode under Martinez's direct control, while accompanying a conventional mechanized infantry unit. Their objective was to secure a village that intelligence suggested was being used as a staging area for drone operations. Halfway to the objective, the patrol came under attack, not from drones, but from conventional forces using rocket-propelled grenades and machine gun fire. The infantry took cover while their supporting Abrams tank engaged the enemy positions. Martinez quickly positioned the Sentinel to provide additional fire support, its sensors identifying enemy locations that were hidden from conventional optics. "Multiple hostiles in the buildings to the north," he reported, relaying the Sentinel's sensor data to the infantry commander. "The AI is also detecting what appear to be civilians in the adjacent structures." Harrington studied the sensor feeds, noting the Sentinel's ability to distinguish between armed combatants and non-combatants based on thermal signatures, movement patterns, and weapons detection. "Sentinel is designating only confirmed hostile targets," he instructed the infantry commander. Green indicators are cleared for engagement. Yellow require visual confirmation before firing. This hybrid approach, AI target identification with human decision-making for final engagement authority, proved devastatingly effective. The patrol neutralized the ambush while avoiding civilian casualties, demonstrating the potential for manned-unmanned teaming in complex combat environments. As they returned to base, the infantry captain approached Harrington. "That machine saved lives today, sir. Spotted hostiles we couldn't see, identified civilian presence we might have missed. I was skeptical, but today made me a believer." Harrington nodded, acknowledging both the compliment and its significance. The troops' acceptance of the new technology would be crucial for its successful integration into combat operations. That evening, as Harrington filed his report on the day's events, he received the news he'd been waiting for. James had been cleared to return to duty and would be arriving at Bagram within the week. The prospect of reuniting with his son in a combat zone created complex emotions. Pride in James's service and recovery, concern for his safety in ongoing operations, and a renewed sense of purpose in ensuring that Iron Shield provided the protection American forces needed against evolving threats. Martinez found him later, staring at the Sentinels as maintenance crews performed routine checks under the harsh lights of the motor pool. "Penny for your thoughts, Colonel?" "Just reflecting on how far we've come," Harrington replied, "from skeptics to advocates. These machines are performing beyond what I thought possible." "But," Martinez prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification, "but they're still machines. They execute their programming brilliantly, but they don't understand the why behind their actions. They don't feel the weight of responsibility that comes with command decisions." Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "That's why the three-tiered approach works. Let the machines handle what they do best: processing sensor data, executing tactical maneuvers, engaging clear threats. Keep humans in the loop for the judgment calls that require moral understanding." "A partnership rather than a replacement," Harrington agreed. "Exactly." Martinez gestured toward the base perimeter, where conventional tanks stood guard alongside the Sentinels. "The future isn't machines instead of humans. It's machines and humans, each doing what they do best." As Harrington considered this wisdom from his old friend, an alert sounded from the command center. They rushed to investigate and found Rodriguez studying a tactical display with intense concentration. "Large drone formation detected, approaching from multiple vectors," he reported. "At least 40 contacts, possibly more. Different signature from previous attacks. These appear to be larger, with extended loiter capabilities." Harrington studied the display, noting the coordinated movement patterns. "This isn't a standard attack. It's too deliberate, too organized. They're probing for weaknesses, looking for patterns in our defensive responses." "Agreed," Rodriguez said. "And there's something else. We're detecting communications jamming, increasing in intensity as they approach. They're trying to isolate us." The implication was clear. The enemy had studied the Sentinels' performance and was adapting their tactics accordingly, specifically targeting the communication systems that enabled remote operation. "Activate both Sentinels in autonomous mode," Harrington ordered. "Full defensive protocols, but maintain the ethical constraints for engagement authorization." As the base prepared for what appeared to be the most significant attack yet, Harrington felt a strange calm. The coming engagement would be the ultimate test of Iron Shield's capabilities, not in controlled environments or limited skirmishes, but against an adaptive enemy specifically targeting its perceived vulnerabilities. Whatever the outcome, the lessons learned would shape the future of American ground combat forces. The last tanker was about to witness the first true battle between autonomous systems, a glimpse of warfare's evolution that few could have imagined during his days commanding steel beasts across the Iraqi desert. For better or worse, the age of the autonomous warrior had arrived, and Thomas Iron Horse Harrington, once skeptical of this technological revolution, now stood at its vanguard, ensuring that as warfare evolved, the human values and warrior ethos that had defined American military excellence would evolve with it, not be replaced, but enhanced for the challenges of a new era. The night sky over Firebase Condor erupted with tracer fire as the Sentinel autonomous combat vehicles engaged the approaching drone swarm. Harrington stood in the command center, watching the tactical display with intense concentration as the battle unfolded. This attack was different, more coordinated, more adaptive than previous encounters. "Communications jamming increasing," reported a signals specialist. We're losing bandwidth to the Sentinels. Switching to local network protocols, Martinez responded, his fingers dancing across his control station. They can jam our satellite uplinks, but they can't block direct line-of-sight transmission. The two Sentinel prototypes had taken optimal defensive positions at the perimeter, their weapon systems tracking the incoming drones with mechanical precision. On screen, their threat identification algorithms categorized each target, assigning engagement priorities based on speed, trajectory, and weapon signatures. 47 contacts confirmed, Rodriguez announced, largest swarm we've encountered yet. Harrington studied the pattern of the attack. Unlike previous engagements where drones had approached in waves, this formation maintained cohesion, almost like a single organism adapting to the defensive fire. As the Sentinels neutralized threats in one sector, the swarm redistributed to exploit gaps in coverage. They're learning, he murmured, or someone's directing them with exceptional tactical awareness. The first wave of drones targeted the base's communications infrastructure, precisely striking satellite uplinks and radio masts. Others began systematic attacks on the perimeter defenses, sacrificing themselves to deplete ammunition and identify defensive weaknesses. The Sentinels responded admirably, their AI cores processing threats and executing countermeasures without the hesitation or confusion that often plagued human operators under stress. Their weapon systems maintained disciplined fire, conserving ammunition while maximizing effectiveness. Sentinel-1 reporting ammunition at 60%, Martinez called out. Sentinel-2 at 73%. They're being efficient, but this swarm is larger than we anticipated. A new alert sounded, and Rodriguez swore under his breath. Electronic warfare detection. They're probing our systems with some kind of advanced penetration protocol. Targeting the AI cores, Harrington realized. Sentinel-2 switched to Mode 3 protocols. Sentinel-1 maintained primary defense. The Mode 3 protocol was a contingency they developed for exactly this scenario, a partial system isolation that sacrificed some capabilities to prevent electronic intrusion. Sentinel-2's movements became slightly less fluid as its systems compartmentalized, but its core defensive functions remained intact. As the battle intensified, Harrington felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another skirmish, it was a fundamental shift in warfare, machine against machine, algorithm against algorithm, with human lives hanging in the balance. The Sentinels were performing beyond expectations, adapting to the evolving threat with impressive speed. But the enemy drones showed a level of coordination that suggested significant technological sophistication. "Sir," Rodriguez called, his voice tight with tension, "we have new contacts approaching from the southwest. Different signature, larger platforms, possibly armed with standoff weapons." Before Harrington could respond, a series of explosions rocked the base perimeter. The tactical display showed multiple impacts around Sentinel-2's position, temporarily disrupting its sensors. "Precision-guided munitions," Martinez reported. "They used the smaller drones as spotters for the larger platforms." It was a classic combined arms tactic adapted for autonomous warfare. One element fixing the defender, while another delivered the decisive blow. Harrington had employed similar approaches countless times with conventional forces, but seeing it executed by machines was unsettling. Sentinel-2 is adapting, Chen noted, monitoring the system's performance. It's repositioning to maintain coverage while reducing exposure. On the tactical display, Sentinel-2 moved smoothly into a defilade position, using terrain features to shield itself while maintaining fire on the most critical threats. It was executing textbook armored tactics without a human commander's input, the AI applying the principles that Harrington and his fellow veterans had helped encode into its tactical framework. Multiple drone platforms neutralized, Martinez reported, as Sentinel-1 scored several direct hits on the larger threats. But they're pressing the attack, more contacts appearing on the eastern approach. For 15 intense minutes, the battle raged across the fire-based perimeter. The Sentinels continued to adapt to the evolving threat, coordinating their defensive efforts with increasing sophistication. When ammunition for their main systems ran low, they seamlessly transitioned to secondary weapons, prioritizing threats to maximize effectiveness. Gradually, the tide turned. The drone swarm, despite its impressive coordination, couldn't penetrate the defensive screen established by the Sentinels. As losses mounted, the remaining platforms began to withdraw, maintaining formation even in retreat. "They're pulling back," Rodriguez confirmed. "Sensor sweeps show all remaining contacts moving away from our perimeter." A subdued cheer went up from the command center staff, but Harrington remained focused on the tactical display, analyzing what they just witnessed. Damage assessment? He asked. Sentinel-2 took multiple hits, but remains operational at 78% capacity, Martinez reported. Sentinel-1 is at 92%. Base defenses suffered moderate damage to the eastern perimeter, but no breaches. Most importantly, no casualties. It was a significant victory. The first time their autonomous systems had faced a truly sophisticated attack and prevailed. Yet Harrington couldn't shake his unease. The enemy's tactics had been too coordinated, too adaptive for conventional insurgents. This was state-level warfare being executed through proxies, a testbed for capabilities that could eventually threaten American forces on a much larger scale. Record all data from this engagement, he instructed. I want a complete analysis, movement patterns, targeting priorities, electronic warfare signatures. Whoever was controlling those drones just showed us their playbook, and I want to know exactly what we're facing. As the command center staff set about their tasks, Harrington stepped outside to clear his head. The desert night was cool, stars brilliant in the clear sky. In the distance, he could see Sentinel-1 continuing its vigilant patrol of the perimeter, mechanical and precise, yet somehow embodying the watchful protection that human soldiers had provided throughout military history. Martinez joined him a few minutes later, offering a canteen of water. Hell of a fight, he observed. Iron Shield just proved its worth beyond any doubt. Harrington took a drink before responding. It performed well. But what concerns me is that someone out there has drone swarm technology that's approaching parity with our systems. The gap is narrowing, Johnny. Still gave us the edge tonight, Martinez pointed out. No American blood spilled. True enough. Harrington couldn't argue with that metric of success. Whatever his philosophical reservations about autonomous warfare, a technology that protected American lives deserved his support. But we need to understand what we just faced. That wasn't some insurgent with commercial drones. That was a coordinated military operation using cutting-edge technology. You think the Russians, Chinese? Could be either. Could be both sharing technology through proxies. Harrington handed back the canteen. Regardless, tonight was just the opening move in a longer game. They tested our capabilities, we tested theirs. Next time, they'll adapt. And so must we. The conversation was interrupted by a communications officer hurrying from the command center. Colonel Harrington, urgent message from General Maxwell. The second Sentinel deployment to Firebase Echo has been attacked. Multiple drone platforms, similar to what we just encountered. Harrington felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Casualties? None reported so far. The Sentinels there repelled the initial assault, but they're requesting reinforcement. And sir, your son is stationed at Echo. He was the one who recognized the attack pattern and implemented countermeasures based on your tactical guidelines. Relief washed over Harrington, followed quickly by pride. James had applied the lessons they'd developed together, potentially saving lives in the process. Tell General Maxwell we'll dispatch Sentinel-2 to Echo as soon as we've completed repairs and rearmed, Harrington decided. I'll accompany the transport personally. As the officer departed, Martinez raised an eyebrow. Putting yourself in harm's way, Colonel? That's not part of our advisory role. Advisory roles evolve in combat zones, Johnny. Besides, James recognized something in those attack patterns that helped Echo respond effectively. I need to understand what he saw, and that's best done face-to-face. Martinez nodded, knowing better than to argue. I'll prep Sentinel-2 for transport. We can be ready to move by 0600. Morning came with the harsh brightness that characterized Afghan dawns. Harrington had slept little, spending most of the night reviewing combat data from both Condor and Echo. The pattern was undeniable. Coordinated attacks against the only two bases where Sentinel prototypes had been deployed. Someone was specifically targeting Iron Shield, testing its capabilities and limitations. The transport helicopter that would carry Sentinel-2 to Firebase Echo was being prepped as Harrington conducted a final briefing with Rodriguez. Maintain maximum alert status, he instructed. They may have withdrawn, but that could be tactical. Watch for electronic probing of your systems. That may precede a follow-up attack. Rodriguez nodded, his expression serious but confident. We'll be ready, sir. Last night was a revelation for the troops. Seeing those machines stand between them and harm's way, it's changed some minds about the project. Good. User acceptance is as important as technical performance. Harrington glanced toward the helipad, where Sentinel-2 was being secured for transport. Use the time to conduct maintenance on Sentinel-1. I want it at 100% capacity by the time we return. The flight to Firebase Echo took 45 minutes, the helicopter maintaining low altitude to minimize exposure to potential threats. Below them, the Afghan landscape stretched in harsh beauty, rugged mountains giving way to valleys where villages had stood for centuries, largely unchanged by the passage of time or the conflicts that regularly swept across their land. Echo was a larger installation than Condor, housing elements of the 10th Mountain Division alongside support personnel and Afghan allies. As the helicopter descended toward the landing zone, Harrington could see signs of the previous night's attack: impact craters around the perimeter, damaged structures being repaired, and the Sentinel prototype positioned vigilantly near the main gate. James was waiting as they disembarked, his uniform dusty but his posture straight. The contrast between their last meeting at Walter Reed Hospital and this moment couldn't have been more stark. His son no longer a wounded warrior, but a combat officer standing tall among his troops. "Colonel," James greeted him formally, mindful of protocol in front of his men. But his eyes conveyed everything words couldn't: relief, pride, the unspoken bond between them. "Lieutenant," Harrington returned equally formally before adding, "Good work on the defensive response last night." "We had excellent intelligence on what to expect," James acknowledged. "Your tactical briefings on drone swarm countermeasures were implemented almost verbatim." They moved toward this command center, walking alongside Sentinel-2 as it was guided to its deployment position by Martinez and a technical team. Around them, soldiers paused in their duties to watch the machine, with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright admiration. "Your Sentinel performed incredibly well," James continued once they were relatively private. "The men have started calling it Iron Knight, a guardian that doesn't sleep, doesn't fear, doesn't hesitate." "As long as they remember it doesn't think or feel either," Harrington cautioned. "It's a tool, not a replacement for human judgment." "Oh, they know that," James assured him. "But after losing friends to drone attacks, they're grateful for any advantage, mechanical or human." Inside the command center, James introduced Harrington to Major Collins, the base commander, who had prepared a comprehensive briefing on the previous night's attack. 38 drone platforms, multiple types, exhibiting coordinated tactical behavior, Collins summarized. "They hit us at 02:15, focusing initially on communications infrastructure, then targeting our defensive positions. Similar to what we experienced at Condor," Harrington noted, studying the tactical display showing the attack pattern. "But you had something we didn't: advance warning." Lieutenant Harrington recognized signs of electronic probing about 20 minutes before visual contact, Collins confirmed. "Based on your tactical briefings, he implemented preemptive defensive measures that significantly reduced the attack's effectiveness." James pulled up specific data points on a nearby terminal. They used a distinctive pattern in their signal intelligence gathering: systematic frequency scanning across military bands, but with unusual dwell times on certain bandwidths. It matched your observations from previous drone activities in this region. Harrington felt a surge of pride. James hadn't just applied the tactical guidelines. He'd recognized subtle patterns that even experienced intelligence officers might have missed. His son had an instinctive grasp of electronic warfare that went beyond formal training. "That advance warning was crucial," Harrington acknowledged. "Without it, you might have suffered significant casualties before getting your defenses organized." "Which is why having Sentinel here was so important," Collins added. "It engaged the threat immediately. No deployment delay, no personnel at risk in exposed positions. By the time our human gunners were in place, the machine had already neutralized the initial wave." The briefing continued with a detailed analysis of the enemy's tactics in the defensive response. Throughout, Harrington noted the increasingly seamless integration of autonomous systems with human forces, Sentinel providing immediate response, while human operators contributed the adaptability and intuition that no machine could match. This was the future of warfare he had envisioned when joining Iron Shield. Not machines replacing humans, but augmenting them, handling the immediate threats while preserving human judgment for complex decisions. The two Firebase engagements had demonstrated both the potential and the limitations of autonomous combat systems. Later, as technical teams prepared Sentinel-2 for deployment, Harrington and James found a rare moment of privacy atop the Firebase's observation post. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the valley below, transforming the harsh landscape into something almost beautiful. "You saved lives last night, James," Harrington said quietly. "Your recognition of that electronic signature gave Echo the warning Condor never had." "I just applied what you taught me," James replied. But it was Iron Shield that made the difference. Without that system, we'd have taken serious casualties even with the warning. Harrington nodded, acknowledging the truth in this assessment. The program is proving its worth faster than anyone anticipated. General Maxwell is already receiving inquiries from multiple commands about deployment timelines. And you? Are you still conflicted about our autonomous systems? It was a perceptive question, cutting to the heart of Harrington's internal struggle throughout the project. Less than I was, he admitted. Seeing Iron Shield in actual combat, the lives it's saving, that changes perspectives. But, James prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification, but I'm concerned about the arms race we're entering. Last night's attacks showed that our adversaries are developing similar capabilities. The technology will proliferate, becoming increasingly sophisticated on all sides. Where does it end? James considered this, his expression thoughtful. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe this is just warfare's next evolution, like gunpowder or aircraft or precision munitions. But if everyone's building these systems, I'd rather have ours be designed by people who understand the human element of combat, not just the technological edge. That's why I joined the project, Harrington agreed, to ensure that whatever emerges from this revolution in military technology still carries forward the principles and values that have guided American forces through our history. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the sun sink below the mountains. Finally, James spoke again, his voice quieter. When I was hit in that attack at Condor, trapped in that damaged tank with drones circling overhead, I had time to think about what I regretted. And you know what came to mind? Not telling you that I understand why you pushed so hard against the bureaucracy all these years. Why you refused to accept comfortable lies about acceptable losses or necessary sacrifices. Harrington felt something tighten in his chest. Pride, pain, love for this young man who carried forward not just his name but his deepest values. I always worried I'd been too harsh a father, he admitted, too focused on principles, not enough on understanding. James shook his head. You taught me to stand for something, to question comfortable assumptions, to fight for what's right, even when it's easier to go along. He gestured towards Sentinel-2, now fully deployed at the perimeter. That machine exists because you refuse to accept that American soldiers should face threats without the best possible protection. Your stubbornness saved lives, including mine. Before Harrington could respond, an alert sounded from the command center. They hurried inside to find the communications officer listening intently to his headset. Multiple contacts detected approaching from the northeast, he reported. Aerial platforms, similar signatures to last night's attack, but more of them. Current count is 60 plus and increasing. The command center burst into activity as Collins issued rapid orders. Defense teams moved to their positions, weapons were armed, and Sentinel-2 activated its full combat protocols. They're escalating, Harrington observed, studying the incoming data, testing our response to a larger force. Or trying to overwhelm us through sheer numbers, James suggested. Sentinel handled 38 drones last night. They want to see if 60 is the breaking point. The tactical display showed the incoming swarm's formation. No longer a single cohesive mass, but multiple smaller groups approaching from different vectors, clearly intended to divide defensive attention and resources. They're adapting, Collins noted grimly, learning from last night's failure. So must we, Harrington replied. He turned to Martinez, who was monitoring Sentinel-2 systems. Implement Protocol 7. Martinez looked surprised but nodded, inputting the commands. Protocol 7 was an experimental approach they'd developed but never tested in combat, a modified defensive posture that sacrificed maximum coverage for enhanced sustainability against overwhelming numbers. Sentinel responding, Martinez confirmed, adjusting position and weapons allocation according to Protocol 7 parameters. On the tactical display, Sentinel-2 moved to a more conservative position, one that provided less overall coverage but better protection from multiple attack vectors. Its targeting systems recalibrated, focusing on threat prioritization rather than attempting to engage every incoming platform. All personnel prepare for sustained engagement, Collins ordered over the base intercom. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. As the base braced for impact, Harrington noticed James studying the drone formation with intense concentration. What do you see? He asked. Something's not right, James replied, pointing to a section of the display. These formations are too perfect, too symmetrical. Last night they showed adaptive behavior, organic responses to our defenses. This looks programmed. Harrington examined the pattern more closely and realized his son was right. The approaching swarm moved with mechanical precision, lacking the fluid adjustment that had characterized the previous attack. "It's a feint," he concluded, "a diversion to pull our attention and resources to the northeast while the real attack comes from somewhere else." James was already redirecting sensor coverage, scanning other approach vectors. "There," he exclaimed, "low-level contacts approaching from the southwest using terrain masking to avoid detection." The tactical display updated to show a second drone formation skimming just above the ground, using ridgelines and valleys to shield their approach. This group was smaller, but appeared to include larger, more heavily armed platforms, the true strike force, while the northeastern swarm served as a diversion. "Classic military deception," Harrington observed with grim appreciation. "Whoever's running these operations has formal tactical training." Collins immediately redirected resources to counter the new threat. "Sentinel-2 target reassignment, priority to southwestern approach vectors." Martinez relayed the commands, and the autonomous combat vehicle smoothly pivoted to address the emerging threat. Its targeting systems locked onto the incoming drones, identifying and prioritizing the largest platforms as primary threats. "All defensive positions, be advised of secondary attack from southwest approach," Collins announced. "Maintain coverage on our primary threat, but prepare for rapid reallocation of resources." The command center fell into focused silence as they watched the dual threat unfold on the tactical displays. The northeastern swarm had accelerated, clearly intended to draw attention and defensive fire, while the southwestern group maintained its stealthy approach. "Sentinel engaging primary threats," Martinez reported, as the autonomous system began targeting the larger platforms in the southwestern group. Its weapon systems executed precise fire missions, each burst calculated for maximum effect while conserving ammunition. The enemy responded immediately, the southwestern drones scattering to evade fire while launching their own weapons, small guided missiles targeting the base's defensive positions. Sentinel-2 shifted to counter-missile operations, its close-in defense systems engaging the incoming projectiles with remarkable accuracy. Meanwhile, the northeastern swarm pressed its attack, forcing the base's human gunners to engage on multiple fronts. The situation was exactly what the enemy had planned: resources divided, attention split, creating opportunities for penetration. "They're pressing both attacks simultaneously now," Collins noted, his voice tense but controlled, "trying to overwhelm our response capacity." "Sentinel-2 is managing the southwestern threat effectively," Martinez reported, "but ammunition consumption is exceeding sustainable rates. We'll face depletion if this continues." It was the classic dilemma of defensive operations: expendable munitions versus a potentially inexhaustible attack. If the enemy was willing to sacrifice enough drones, eventually Sentinel would exhaust its ammunition, leaving the base vulnerable to follow-up attacks. Harrington studied the tactical display, looking for patterns, weaknesses, opportunities. Years of battlefield experience had taught him that every attack, no matter how well planned, had vulnerabilities. The key was identifying them before your own resources were depleted. "The southwestern drones are more sophisticated, but fewer in number," he observed, "and they're maintaining tighter formation integrity even when taking fire." Suggesting centralized control rather than distributed autonomy, James added, following his father's reasoning, "possibly a command platform coordinating the others." That was the vulnerability Harrington had been seeking. If we can identify and neutralize the command platform, we might disrupt the entire southwestern attack. James was already analyzing sensor data, looking for anomalies in the drone formation. "There," he identified, highlighting a platform hanging back from the main attack. "This one's maintaining consistent altitude and position while the others maneuver. Minimal emissions but receiving significant data traffic from the other platforms." "That's our target," Harrington confirmed. "Martinez, designate that platform as alpha priority for Sentinel-2. The autonomous combat vehicle immediately adjusted its targeting priorities, focusing its most precise weapon system on the identified command drone. The 30mm chain gun tracked smoothly, compensating for wind and distance before firing a short, controlled burst. The effect was immediate and dramatic. As the command platform disintegrated under accurate fire, the southwestern drone swarm faltered. Some platforms continued their attack runs, but with noticeably degraded coordination. Others hovered in apparent confusion, their programmed behaviors disrupted by the loss of centralized guidance. "It's working," Collins observed. "The southwestern attack is losing cohesion." Sentinel-2 pressed the advantage, methodically engaging the now vulnerable drones while they struggled to reorganize. Within minutes, the southwestern threat had been effectively neutralized, allowing defensive resources to redirect toward the northeastern swarm. This larger group continued its attack, but with diminishing effectiveness as it faced the base's now consolidated defenses. Sentinel-2, having eliminated the more dangerous southwestern threat, turned its weapon systems toward the remaining drones, adding its considerable firepower to the base's defensive screen. Gradually, the attackers' losses mounted beyond sustainable levels. The northeastern swarm began to withdraw, maintaining enough formation discipline to suggest some level of autonomous decision-making rather than central control. They're retreating, Martinez confirmed as the contact count diminished. Sensor sweeps show remaining platforms moving away from our perimeter at maximum speed. A cheer went up from the command center staff, but Harrington remained focused on the tactical display, analyzing what they'd just witnessed and survived. Damage assessment, Collins requested. Minor structural damage to the southwestern perimeter, came the report. 2 defensive positions hit, 1 casualty. Sergeant Willis with shrapnel wounds, non-life-threatening. Sentinel-2 reports ammunition at 37% and minor damage to secondary sensor arrays. Considering the scale of the attack, the outcome represented a significant victory. The enemy had committed substantial resources, employed sophisticated tactics, and still failed to penetrate the base's defenses or inflict meaningful casualties. We just faced their best shot and turned it back, Collins said with carefully controlled satisfaction. The combination of Sentinel's immediate response capabilities and our human tactical adaptability proved decisive. Harrington nodded, but his mind was already analyzing the broader implications. They showed us something important tonight, a willingness to sacrifice large numbers of platforms to test our capabilities. That suggests significant resources and industrial capacity. And professional military planning, James added. The diversionary attack coordinated with the main thrust, the command and control structure, the tactical retreat when losses became unsustainable. That's not insurgent tactics. That's state-level warfare by proxy. The assessment aligned with Harrington's own conclusions. They weren't facing random attacks by non-state actors, but a coordinated campaign to test American defensive capabilities and probe for weaknesses. Someone was using Afghanistan as a laboratory for next-generation autonomous warfare, with American forces as unwitting test subjects. We need to get this intelligence back to Pentagon immediately, Harrington decided. The tactical data from tonight's engagement, especially the command and control signatures from that lead platform, could help identify who's behind these attacks. Already compiling the package, Martinez confirmed. I've isolated the electronic signatures and targeting patterns for analysis. As the command center shifted from combat operations to assessment and recovery, Harrington found a moment to reflect on what they'd achieved. Iron Shield had faced its most significant test and emerged successful, protecting American lives while demonstrating the potential of human-machine teaming in combat operations. Yet the engagement had also revealed the rapidly evolving nature of the threat. Their adversaries were learning, adapting, developing increasingly sophisticated autonomous weapons and tactics. The window of technological advantage that Iron Shield currently provided would narrow quickly unless they continued to innovate and refine their own capabilities. Later that night, after ensuring Sentinel-2 was operational and properly integrated into Firebase Echo's defenses, Harrington joined James for a brief meal in the officers' mess. Around them, soldiers discussed the evening's engagement with animation, many expressing newfound appreciation for the autonomous system that had stood between them and harm. "Iron Knight saved our asses tonight," one sergeant was saying to his squad. "Never thought I'd be grateful for a robot, but that machine is welcome in my Firebase anytime." James smiled at the comment. Acceptance is growing quickly. Nothing convinces a soldier like seeing a system perform under fire. "It's performing beyond our projections," Harrington acknowledged. "The tactical learning algorithms are adapting faster than we anticipated, applying the lessons from each engagement to improve response in the next. And the ethical constraints are holding," James pointed out. During the entire engagement, Sentinel maintained proper target discrimination. Even when the southwestern drones attempted to use our own vehicles as background clutter to confuse identification systems. This was perhaps the most significant success from Harrington's perspective, that the machine had maintained the moral framework they'd labored to instill. Iron Shield wasn't just technically effective, it was operationally responsible. adhering to the same ethical constraints that guided human soldiers. Their meal was interrupted by a communications officer. Colonel Harrington, priority message from General Maxwell. Your presence is requested back at Bagram immediately for secure video conference with Pentagon leadership. Harrington nodded, wiping his mouth and standing. Tell them I'll depart at first light. He turned to James. I need to get our assessment of these attacks to decision makers quickly. Something bigger is happening here than random drone strikes. James walked with him toward the door. Will you be returning to Echo afterward? Unlikely. Maxwell mentioned significant program developments that may require my presence at higher headquarters. Harrington paused, studying his son's face in the harsh fluorescent light. You've got Sentinel-2 integrated into your defenses now. Use it well, but remember its limitations. The machine is a tool, not a replacement for human judgment. I remember, James assured him, and I'll make sure the men do too. Iron Knight may be the newest hero on base, but we all know it's the soldiers who make the real difference. They parted with a formal handshake that conveyed more than words could express. Professional respect layered atop the deep bond between father and son. Warriors from different generations united in common purpose. The following morning, as Harrington prepared to board the transport helicopter back to Bagram, Martinez approached with a data tablet. Final analysis of last night's engagement, he reported. I've identified something interesting in the electronic signatures from that command platform. He handed over the tablet, displaying a technical readout. The encoding protocols have distinctive characteristics that match known Chinese military standards, but with modifications suggesting Russian influence. Collaborative development, Harrington concluded, consistent with intelligence assessments of increasing technological cooperation between those powers. The implications are significant, Martinez noted. If they're sharing drone warfare technology, combining Chinese manufacturing capacity with Russian electronic warfare expertise, then Iron Shield becomes even more critical to maintaining American technological superiority, Harrington finished, which explains Maxwell's urgency in requesting this briefing. The flight to Bagram passed quickly, Harrington using the time to refine his assessment of the twin engagements at Condor and Echo. By the time they landed, he had compiled a comprehensive analysis that went beyond technical performance metrics to address the strategic implications of what they'd witnessed. General Maxwell was waiting in the secure communications facility, his expression revealing nothing of the reason for his summons. Tom, he greeted Harrington with a firm handshake. Your reports from Echo made quite an impression at the Pentagon. The Joint Chiefs have taken personal interest in Iron Shield's combat performance. The system has exceeded expectations, Harrington acknowledged. But more concerning is the sophistication of the attacks we're facing. These aren't insurgent operations, Howard. They're state-level capabilities being deployed through proxies. That assessment aligns with broader intelligence, Maxwell confirmed, guiding him toward the secure conference room, which is why today's briefing is occurring at the highest levels. Inside, the large display screen showed a waiting video conference connection to the Pentagon. When Maxwell activated the link, Harrington was surprised to see not just military leadership, but civilian officials as well, including the Secretary of Defense. Colonel Harrington, the Secretary began without preamble. We've reviewed the preliminary data from Firebase Echo. Your Iron Shield system appears to have performed remarkably well under extremely challenging conditions. Yes, sir, Harrington confirmed. The autonomous response capabilities proved decisive in countering a sophisticated, multi-vector attack that specifically targeted the system's perceived vulnerabilities. More importantly, added the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, you've confirmed our intelligence regarding adversary development of autonomous combat systems. The electronic signatures from last night's command platform match patterns we've observed in Chinese and Russian developmental programs. The implications were sobering. America's primary strategic competitors were using Afghanistan as a testing ground for next-generation autonomous weapons, gaining valuable operational experience while probing American defensive capabilities. Based on these developments, the Secretary continued, we're accelerating the Iron Shield deployment schedule. The President has authorized immediate production of 30 additional units for deployment to critical forward locations. Harrington absorbed this news with mixed emotions. The accelerated timeline validated the project's importance, but raised concerns about rushing systems into deployment before they were fully mature. Sir, while I'm gratified by the confidence in Iron Shield, I should note that we're still refining the system based on combat experience, he cautioned. The ethical frameworks and tactical decision algorithms in particular benefit from iterative improvement. Understood, Colonel. the secretary acknowledged. But our intelligence indicates that both China and Russia are moving toward large-scale production of similar systems. The technology gap is narrowing more quickly than anticipated. We cannot afford to fall behind in this critical area. The chairman added, "We're not suggesting deployment without proper preparation. That's why we need you to return to Aberdeen immediately to oversee the training program for the crews who will operate these systems." So that was the significant program development Maxwell had referenced, not just accelerated production, but Harrington's reassignment from the field back to the development facility. "With respect, sir, my presence in theater has proven valuable during these initial engagements," Harrington pointed out. "The ability to make immediate tactical adjustments based on combat performance is precisely why we need you at Aberdeen," the secretary interrupted. "Every lesson you've learned needs to be incorporated into the training program and technical refinements for the production models. Your expertise is now more valuable at the strategic level than the tactical." Harrington recognized the logic, even as he felt reluctance to leave the operational environment where Iron Shield was proving its worth. The 30 additional units represented a major commitment to the technology, one that could shape the future of American ground combat capabilities for decades to come. "I understand, sir," he conceded. "When would you like me to depart?" "Transport is already arranged for tomorrow morning," Maxwell informed him. "Dr. Chen and the core development team will meet you at Aberdeen to begin the knowledge transfer process immediately." The briefing continued with details of the accelerated deployment schedule, production timelines, and training requirements. Throughout, Harrington noted the increased urgency in the official's tone, a recognition that autonomous combat systems had moved from theoretical future capability to present-day operational necessity. When the conference concluded, Maxwell escorted Harrington from the secure facility. "You've achieved something remarkable, Tom," he observed. "6 months ago, Iron Shield was a controversial concept facing significant skepticism. Now it's being fast-tracked as a critical national security asset." "The battlefield has a way of clarifying priorities," Harrington replied. "Nothing validates a concept like seeing it save American lives under fire." "True enough," Maxwell hesitated, then added, "there's something else you should know. Your son's performance during these engagements has been noted at the highest levels. His ability to recognize the electronic signatures before the Echo attack and his tactical insight during last night's engagement have marked him for accelerated promotion." Pride warmed Harrington's chest, tempered by the knowledge of what accelerated promotion typically meant: increased responsibility and risk. "James has always had exceptional situational awareness," he acknowledged. "Even as a child, he noticed patterns others missed. He's been recommended to lead the first operational Iron Shield company once training is complete," Maxwell continued. 6 vehicles, integrated with conventional armor elements. A proving ground for the concepts you've developed. The news brought conflicting emotions: pride in James's accomplishments, concern for the risks he would face, satisfaction that the Iron Shield program would benefit from a commander who truly understood its capabilities and limitations. "He'll do well," Harrington said simply. "He understands the balance between technological advantage and human judgment better than most officers twice his age." That evening, as he packed his few belongings for the return journey to the United States, Harrington reflected on how dramatically circumstances had changed since he'd first joined the Iron Shield project. What had begun as a controversial experiment in autonomous combat systems had evolved into a vital defensive capability, protecting American forces against emerging threats while redefining the relationship between human soldiers and their mechanical counterparts. The path forward would bring new challenges: training programs to develop, ethical frameworks to refine, tactical doctrine to establish. Yet the fundamental principles that had guided the project from its inception remain valid. Machines should augment human capabilities rather than replace them. Technological advantage must be balanced with moral responsibility, and the ultimate purpose of innovation was protecting the lives of those who served. As Afghanistan receded beneath the transport aircraft the following morning, Harrington turned his thoughts toward the work ahead. Iron Shield had proven itself in combat, but the true test lay in transforming a successful prototype into an operational system that could be deployed at scale while maintaining the ethical and tactical standards they'd established. The drone threat would continue to evolve, driving constant innovation in countermeasures and tactics. America's strategic competitors would accelerate their own autonomous weapons programs, creating an arms race in artificial intelligence and robotics that could fundamentally transform warfare. Yet amid this technological revolution, Harrington remained convinced that the human element would prove decisive, not just in operating the machines or establishing their ethical constraints, but in understanding the broader context of conflict, the strategic objectives, moral considerations, and human consequences that gave meaning to military action. Iron Shield represented not the obsolescence of the human soldier, but the evolution of how humans fought, extending their capabilities, protecting them from harm, multiplying their effectiveness. The warrior ethos that had defined American military excellence for generations would not be replaced by algorithms and automation, but expressed through new means, adapted for new challenges while preserving its essential character. As the aircraft banked eastward toward home, Harrington allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. The integration of autonomous systems into American ground forces would not be without difficulties. But the path they had established, balancing technological innovation with human wisdom, operational effectiveness with ethical responsibility, offered the best hope for navigating the complex future of warfare while remaining true to the values that had always guided American soldiers in battle. The journey that had begun with skepticism and reservation had led to a new understanding, not of machines replacing humans, but of a partnership that preserved what was best in both. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Iron Shield would face them with the same balance of technological sophistication and human judgment that had already proven decisive on the battlefield. And in that balance lay the true legacy of the last tanker's final mission. Aberdeen Proving Ground greeted Harrington with the familiar sounds of weapons testing and vehicle engines as his transport pulled through the security checkpoint. The facility had changed since his last visit, with new buildings dedicated to autonomous systems development and expanded testing areas specifically designed for the Sentinel program. Dr. Rebecca Chen was waiting as he disembarked, her usual professional demeanor softened by a genuine smile. "Welcome back, Colonel. You've become something of a legend since you left for Afghanistan." "Legends are usually exaggerated," Harrington replied dryly. "I'm just a soldier who saw a system perform well under fire." "A system you helped shape," she reminded him as they walked toward the main development building. "Your combat experience and tactical insights gave Sentinel capabilities that pure engineers would never have considered." Inside, the facility buzzed with increased activity. The production order for 30 Sentinel units had energized the project, transforming it from experimental research to prioritized defense initiative. Engineers and technicians moved with purpose between workstations, testing components and analyzing data from the Afghanistan deployments. Dr. Robert Morgan, the AI specialist, intercepted them as they entered the main laboratory. His typically rumpled appearance was even more disheveled than usual, suggesting long hours without rest. "Colonel, excellent timing," he greeted Harrington. "We've been analyzing the combat data from Echo. The autonomous response algorithms perform beyond our projections, particularly in the target discrimination sequences during the Southwestern attack." "The system did well," Harrington acknowledged. "But what concerns me is the sophistication of what we faced. Those weren't insurgent operations. They were state-level capabilities being deployed through proxies." Morgan nodded gravely. "We've identified electronic signatures consistent with Chinese military systems, but with modifications suggesting Russian influence. The implications are significant. Which is why our timeline has been accelerated," Chen added, guiding them toward a conference room where several other team members waited. 30 Sentinel units authorized for immediate production, with the first 10 needed for deployment within 60 days. The compressed schedule was ambitious, perhaps unrealistic, but Harrington understood the urgency. America's strategic competitors were clearly advancing their own autonomous combat programs rapidly. The technological advantage that Iron Shield currently provided could quickly evaporate without accelerated development and deployment. The briefing that followed detailed the production challenges, training requirements, and technical refinements needed to transition from prototype to operational system. Throughout, Harrington noted both the progress made during his absence and the significant hurdles that remained. "The ethical decision frameworks are my primary concern," he stated, when the technical discussion concluded. "In Afghanistan, we operated under specific rules of engagement with clear threat identification. But future deployments may face more ambiguous situations. We've been expanding the ethical parameters based on your field reports," Chen assured him. "The system now incorporates more nuanced decision trees for distinguishing between combatants and non-combatants in complex environments." And human override remains built into all operational modes, Morgan added. Even in fully autonomous operation, critical engagement decisions still require human confirmation when ambiguity exceeds certain thresholds. This balance between autonomous capability and human oversight had been Harrington's core principle throughout the project. The machines could process information and react with superhuman speed, but judgment in morally complex situations remained a uniquely human responsibility. We'll need to develop comprehensive training protocols, Harrington noted, not just for the technical operators, but for the tactical commanders who will integrate these systems into conventional operations. That's where you come in, Chen responded. No one understands both the technical capabilities and tactical applications better than you do. General Maxwell wants you to personally oversee the training program development. The assignment made sense. Harrington's experience bridged the gap between traditional armored warfare and emerging autonomous systems. He understood both the technology's potential and its limitations, the advantages it provided and the risks it presented. Over the following weeks, Harrington immersed himself in developing the Iron Shield training program. Working with Chen, Morgan, and a team of instructors from various military backgrounds, he created a curriculum that balanced technical proficiency with tactical understanding. The first class of operators and commanders arrived in early May, 24 soldiers selected for their technical aptitude, combat experience, and adaptability. Among them was Captain Michael Rodriguez, who had commanded Firebase Condor during the initial Sentinel deployment. "Good to see you again, Captain," Harrington greeted him during the orientation session. "Your experience with Sentinel in actual combat conditions will be valuable to your fellow trainees." Rodriguez nodded. The men started calling it Iron Knight after that first engagement, said it stood guard like a medieval sentinel, never sleeping, never tiring. By the time I left, even the most skeptical soldiers had accepted it as part of the team. "That's exactly what we're aiming for," Harrington replied. "Not replacement, but integration, autonomous systems working alongside human soldiers, each contributing what they do best." The training program progressed rapidly, compressed by the urgent deployment timeline. The operators learned to manage the Sentinel's complex systems, understand its capabilities and limitations, and integrate it into conventional operations. The commanders studied tactical applications, ethical constraints, and the strategic implications of autonomous warfare. Throughout, Harrington emphasized the core principle that had guided Iron Shield from its inception. The machines were tools, not replacements for human judgment. They could process information faster, operate without rest, and engage targets with precision. But they lacked the moral understanding and contextual awareness that defined human decision-making. "Your responsibility goes beyond technical operation," he told the class during a tactical exercise. "You are the conscience of these systems, the judgment that gives meaning to their actions. Never abdicate that responsibility, no matter how impressive the technology becomes." Halfway through the training program, General Maxwell visited Aberdeen to assess progress. He found Harrington observing a field exercise where trainees were practicing coordinated operations between Sentinel units and conventional forces. "Impressive integration," Maxwell noted, as they watched a Sentinel provide covering fire while infantry secured a simulated objective. "They're already operating as a cohesive unit." "They're adapting quickly," Harrington agreed. "Rodriguez's combat experience has been particularly valuable. He's helping the others understand how Sentinel performs under actual fire." Maxwell nodded approvingly. "The Joint Chiefs are pleased with the progress reports. The Secretary of Defense has authorized an additional 20 units beyond the initial 30, with expedited delivery schedules." The expanded production order reflected the program's increasing priority within the defense establishment, a dramatic shift from its controversial beginnings. Iron Shield had transformed from experimental concept to strategic asset, driven by the demonstrated effectiveness of the Sentinel prototypes and the growing threat of adversary autonomous systems. "We've received updated intelligence on foreign development programs," Maxwell continued, his expression growing more serious. "Satellite imagery has identified what appears to be a testing facility in western China, with vehicle signatures consistent with autonomous combat systems. Similar activity has been observed at a Russian facility near Kazan, confirming our assessment from the Afghanistan engagements," Harrington noted. "They're accelerating their programs, likely sharing technology and operational concepts." "Which makes your training program all the more critical," Maxwell emphasized. We need Iron Shield operational and deployed before these systems appear on potential battlefields. The technological advantage may be temporary, but it's essential. The conversation was interrupted by a secure call from Maxwell. When he returned several minutes later, his expression had darkened considerably. There's been another attack, he informed Harrington. Firebase Echo, more sophisticated than previous engagements. Multiple drone types, coordinated electronic warfare, precision munitions. Harrington felt his chest tighten. Casualties? 4 wounded, none critical. The Sentinel unit performed exceptionally well, neutralizing most threats before they penetrated the defensive perimeter. Maxwell paused, then added, Lieutenant Harrington coordinated the defense. His after-action report specifically credits the tactical protocols you developed as being decisive in repelling the attack. Relief washed through Harrington at the news that James was safe, followed by pride in his son's performance. But beneath these emotions lay a deeper concern. The escalating sophistication of these attacks suggested a deliberate campaign to test American defensive capabilities and gather intelligence on Iron Shield's operational parameters. They're probing for weaknesses, Harrington observed, each attack slightly different, testing various approaches to defeat the system. Agreed, which is why we've authorized deployment of the first production Sentinels to Afghanistan as soon as they clear final testing. 4 units initially, with more to follow as they become available. The accelerated deployment would put pressure on the training program, requiring graduated operators to transition immediately to combat operations rather than following the more deliberate implementation originally planned. Yet the urgency was undeniable. American forces were facing an evolving threat that conventional defenses struggled to counter. As Maxwell departed, Harrington returned his attention to the training exercise with renewed focus. The soldiers learning to operate and command these systems would soon be facing actual combat, their decisions and actions potentially determining the outcome of engagements like the one James had just experienced. That evening, Harrington received a secure video call from James at Firebase Echo. Despite the poor connection, his son's fatigue was evident in the shadows beneath his eyes and the tension in his expression. That was a different level of attack, Dad, James reported after confirming he was uninjured. Not just more platforms, but better coordination, advanced electronic warfare, precision munitions delivered with surgical accuracy. Maxwell briefed me, Harrington replied. Your after-action report mentioned our tactical protocols were effective? James nodded. The threat prioritization matrix you developed worked exactly as designed. Sentinel identified and engaged the command platforms first, degrading their ability to coordinate the attack. But they're learning too. This time they distributed command functions across multiple platforms rather than centralizing control. Adaptive adversaries, Harrington murmured, each engagement teaching them as much as it teaches us. Exactly, and they're escalating the scale and sophistication with each attack. James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Harrington recognized from his own mannerisms. We need more Sentinels, and we need them soon. The conventional defenses just can't respond quickly enough to these threats. The first production units will deploy within 3 weeks, Harrington assured him. I'm training the operators personally. They'll arrive ready to integrate immediately into your defensive operations. Relief flickered across James's tired face. That's the best news I've heard in weeks. The men are performing admirably, but they're exhausted. These attacks come without warning, often at night, requiring constant vigilance. Hold the line, son. Reinforcement is coming. Harrington hesitated, then added, And James, I'm proud of you. Commanding under these conditions tests everything a leader has. You're meeting that test. A brief smile softened James's expression. Learn from the best, Dad. I keep asking myself what you would do in these situations. The conversation shifted to technical details of the recent attack, with James providing insights that would inform both the ongoing training program and technical refinements to the production Sentinels. Throughout, Harrington was struck by his son's tactical maturity and calm assessment, despite the stress he clearly faced. When the call ended, Harrington immediately contacted Chen and Morgan to relay the new information. The development team worked through the night, adjusting the Sentinel's electronic countermeasure systems and tactical algorithms to address the evolving threat James had described. The training program continued at an accelerated pace, with Harrington pushing both himself and the trainees to their limits. The timeline allowed no margin for error. These soldiers would deploy directly to combat operations, responsible for systems that would stand between American forces and sophisticated autonomous weapons. The enemy is adaptive, Harrington emphasized during tactical briefings. Each engagement teaches them about our capabilities and limitations, just as it teaches us about theirs. You must be equally adaptive, using the flexibility that human judgment provides to counter their evolving tactics. Rodriguez emerged as a natural leader among the trainees, his combat experience with Sentinel giving him insights that theory alone couldn't provide. Harrington assigned him as lead instructor for the second training cohort, recognizing that operational knowledge would need to cascade quickly as more units deployed. 3 weeks into the program, as the first 4 production Sentinels completed final testing, Maxwell arrived with unexpected news. The deployment plan has changed, he informed Harrington during a private briefing. Intelligence indicates a significant escalation is imminent, not just at Echo and Condor, but across multiple forward operating bases in northeastern Afghanistan. Coordinated attacks? Harrington asked, immediately grasping the strategic implications. Maxwell nodded grimly. Assessment suggests they're transitioning from testing to operational employment. Previous engagements were probing our defenses and gathering intelligence on Iron Shield capabilities. Now they appear to be preparing a theater-wide assault using autonomous systems. The shift from isolated attacks to coordinated offensive operations represented a dangerous escalation. If successful, such attacks could inflict significant casualties and potentially force a reassessment of America's continued presence in Afghanistan. We're expediting deployment of all available Sentinel units, Maxwell continued. The first 8 will deploy within 48 hours, with operators from your training program. You'll accompany them to coordinate tactical implementation across multiple bases. Harrington absorbed this news with mixed emotions. Returning to Afghanistan meant being closer to the emerging threat, able to directly influence the defensive response rather than managing from a distance. Yet it also meant leaving the training program at a critical juncture, with subsequent cohorts requiring the knowledge he developed. Rodriguez can continue the training here, Maxwell added, anticipating Harrington's concern. He's absorbed your tactical approach and has the combat experience to make it credible. We need you where the threat is greatest, helping coordinate the integrated defense across multiple bases. The logic was sound, if uncomfortable. Harrington had always led from the front, preferring direct action to rear echelon management. The emerging threat in Afghanistan would require his experience and tactical understanding deployed where it could have immediate impact. When do we depart? He asked simply. Transport leaves tomorrow at 600. Your primary assignment will be Firebase Echo, coordinating defense across the northeastern sector. Maxwell paused, then added, I don't need to tell you that your son's base appears to be a primary target in the coming offensive. All intelligence indicates they're focusing significant resources there. The implication was clear. James's successful defense of Echo during previous attacks had marked both him and his base as priority targets. The enemy had demonstrated a pattern of escalating each engagement, learning from failures and returning with improved tactics and increased resources. I understand, Harrington replied, his voice steady despite the concern that tightened his chest. I'll brief the deployment team immediately. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. The 8 Sentinel units were loaded onto transport aircraft along with their operators and support personnel. Harrington conducted final briefings, reviewed tactical plans, and coordinated with forward commanders to prepare for the system's integration. Throughout, he maintained the professional detachment that had defined his military career, compartmentalizing his personal concern for James behind the broader responsibility to all the American forces he was tasked with protecting. The Sentinel deployment wasn't about one base or one soldier. It was about countering an evolving threat that endangered thousands. The flight to Bagram Air Base took 14 hours, during which Harrington reviewed all available intelligence on the anticipated attacks. Pattern analysis suggested a significant escalation in both quantity and quality of autonomous platforms, with indicators pointing to a coordinated offensive within the next 7 to 10 days. Upon arrival, Harrington immediately established a tactical coordination center, bringing together intelligence officers, defensive systems specialists, and commanders from the various threatened bases. James joined via secure video link from Echo, providing insights from the frontline perspective. We've identified unusual signal patterns consistent with pre-attack preparations, James reported, highlighting electronic warfare signatures detected around Echo's perimeter. similar to what preceded the last attack, but more extensive and methodical. They're mapping our defenses, Harrington observed, identifying communication networks, sensor coverage, weapon emplacements, preparing for a systematic assault rather than the probing attacks we've seen previously. The assessment was sobering, but aligned with intelligence estimates. Previous engagements had been learning exercises for the adversary, testing American defensive capabilities and gathering data on Sentinel operations. Now they appeared ready to apply those lessons in a coordinated offensive designed to overwhelm even enhanced defenses. Distribution of Sentinel units becomes critical, Harrington told the assembled officers. We need to deploy them where they can provide maximum coverage while supporting each other against concentrated attacks. Over the next 3 days, the 8 Sentinel units were transported to their assigned bases and integrated into existing defensive systems. Harrington traveled between locations, ensuring proper implementation of the tactical protocols and coordination mechanisms he'd developed. At Firebase Echo, he found James supervising the deployment of 2 Sentinel units, positioning them to provide overlapping coverage of the most vulnerable approach vectors. Despite the strain of continuous operations, his son maintained the calm, methodical leadership that had earned him accelerated promotion and increasing responsibility. The men have started calling them Steel Guardians, James mentioned, as they observed the autonomous vehicles taking up defensive positions. Said Iron Knight was too medieval for such advanced technology. Harrington smiled slightly. Soldiers and their nicknames, always more meaningful than the official designations. They worked together through the evening, reviewing defensive plans and coordination protocols for the anticipated attack. James had developed innovative applications of the Sentinel's capabilities, adapting Harrington's tactical framework to the specific conditions at Echo with impressive insight. You've taken the basic concepts further than I anticipated, Harrington observed as they studied the integrated defense plan James had developed. Had a good foundation to build on, James replied. Your tactical principles are solid. I just adapted them to our specific terrain and threat profile. The comment embodied what Harrington had always hoped for in Iron Shield. Not rigid adherence to predetermined protocols, but adaptable frameworks that intelligent commanders could modify for specific operational requirements. The machines provided consistent performance and rapid response, while human leaders contributed the contextual understanding and tactical creativity that no algorithm could replicate. As they concluded their planning session, James hesitated before speaking again. The men know something big is coming. They can feel it in the increased reconnaissance, the probing of our communications, the pattern of recent attacks. But they're confident, Dad. The Sentinels have proven themselves, and the integrated defense plan makes sense to every soldier who studied it. Good. Confidence matters as much as capability when facing superior numbers. Harrington clapped his son's shoulder briefly. Get some rest. I'll complete the final coordination with the other bases. The following day brought increased electronic warfare activity around multiple bases in the northeastern sector. Signal intelligence detected sophisticated probing of defensive systems, communications networks, and sensor arrays, the electronic equivalent of reconnaissance in force. They're mapping everything, reported the signals intelligence officer at Bagram. Communications pathways, defensive emplacements, sensor coverage. Building a complete picture of our capabilities before they commit to the main attack. Consistent with Russian electronic warfare doctrine, Harrington noted. Thorough preparation before decisive action. But the autonomous platforms show Chinese design philosophy, distributed, networked, optimized for swarming tactics. The hybrid approach suggested continued collaboration between these powers, combining their respective strengths to create a more formidable capability than either could develop independently. It was a concerning development strategically, even beyond the immediate tactical threat. That evening, intelligence indicated a significant movement of materials and personnel approximately 60 kilometers from the Afghanistan-Tajikistan border. Satellite imagery identified what appeared to be launch platforms and control stations consistent with large-scale drone operations. Assessments suggest final staging for the anticipated offensive, reported the intelligence officer, estimated 36 to 48 hours before they achieve operational readiness. Harrington studied the imagery with focused attention. The scale of the identified assets suggested a much larger operation than previous attacks, potentially hundreds of autonomous platforms deployed simultaneously across multiple targets. Even with Sentinel units in place, such an assault would test the limits of their defensive capabilities. Alert all forward bases, he instructed. Maximum readiness posture effective immediately. I want continuous sensor sweeps, electronic warfare countermeasures active, and all defensive systems fully operational. Throughout the next day, tension built across the northeastern sector as preparations continued. Additional conventional forces were repositioned to reinforce threatened bases, ammunition stocks were verified, and emergency medical preparations implemented. Harrington returned to Echo to finalize coordination with James, ensuring the base's 2 Sentinel units were positioned optimally and fully integrated with conventional defensive systems. The autonomous vehicles had been upgraded with enhanced electronic warfare countermeasures based on data from previous attacks, improving the resilience against the jamming and hacking attempts that had proven most effective in earlier engagements. We've established direct line-of-sight communication links between all defensive positions, James explained, showing the redundant network they'd created. Even if they jam satellite communications and standard radio frequencies, we can maintain tactical coordination across the perimeter. It was a thoughtful adaptation to a demonstrated enemy capability, exactly the kind of human innovation that complemented the machine's raw processing power and reaction speed. Together, they created a defensive system greater than the sum of its parts. As sunset approached, signal intelligence detected increased electromagnetic emissions from the border staging area. Surveillance drones captured images of vehicles moving into launch positions and generator units powering up. They're commencing operations, Harrington concluded after reviewing the intelligence. All bases, final defensive preparations. Expect contact within 6 hours. The warning spread across the northeastern sector as night fell, each base completing final checks of weapon systems and defensive positions. At Echo, James ordered his men to rotating rest cycles, ensuring that fresh troops would be available throughout the anticipated engagement. Harrington joined the command center staff, reviewing sensor coverage and communication protocols one final time. The Sentinel units were positioned at opposite corners of the base perimeter, their overlapping fields of fire creating a nearly continuous defensive screen against aerial threats. All defense systems operational, reported the senior NCO. Sentinels at full combat readiness, conventional forces in position, medical teams standing by. Now came the most difficult part of command, the waiting. Harrington had experienced it countless times throughout his career, that tense interval between completing preparations and the commencement of action. It was a time when doubt could creep in, when the mind generated countless scenarios and second-guessed decisions already made. To combat this, he methodically reviewed the defense plan yet again, seeking any overlooked vulnerability or missed opportunity. The integration of Sentinel units with conventional forces created a layered defense that addressed the lessons learned from previous engagements. Each system compensated for the other's weaknesses, creating a whole stronger than any individual component. Shortly after midnight, the first warning came from signal intelligence. Multiple emissions detected bearing 045, range approximately 40 kilometers. Electronic signature consistent with autonomous platform control systems. All defensive positions, alert status, James ordered across the base communication network. Sentinel units, activate combat protocols. The autonomous vehicles responded immediately, their sensor arrays pivoting to focus on the northeastern approach vector as weapon systems cycled into ready status. Around them, human soldiers moved to their assigned positions, weapons checked and communications verified. Contact confirmed, announced the sensor operator several minutes later. Multiple aerial platforms approaching from the northeast. Current count exceeds previous engagements, estimate 100 plus and increasing. The tactical display updated to show the approaching formation, not a single mass but multiple smaller groups spread across a wide front, clearly intended to test defensive coverage and identify weaknesses. The sophistication of the approach confirmed intelligence assessments that this was not merely another probe, but a deliberate offensive operation. Sentinel-1, primary engagement sector, northeast quadrant, James directed. Sentinel-2, northwest quadrant with secondary coverage of the northeast approach. Conventional defenses, maintain alert for ground penetration attempts under cover of the aerial attack. The defensive systems responded with disciplined precision, each component focusing on its assigned sector while maintaining awareness of the broader tactical situation. The Sentinel units in particular demonstrated the value of their advanced sensor integration, tracking multiple threats simultaneously and prioritizing them according to the tactical algorithms Harrington had helped develop. Initial contact in approximately 3 minutes, reported the sensor operator. Enemy formation maintaining dispersed approach. Electronic warfare activity increasing. They're probing our communications networks and sensor systems. Implement communication protocol Delta, Harrington advised, rotating frequencies with irregular intervals to complicate jamming efforts. James nodded, implementing the suggestion immediately. The communication officers began cycling through predetermined frequency patterns, making it more difficult for enemy systems to identify and jam critical networks. As the first drone platforms came within visual range, Sentinel-1 initiated engagement, its main weapon system tracking and firing with mechanical precision. The 30mm rounds found their targets with remarkable accuracy, neutralizing the lead elements of the approaching formation. Effective engagement, confirmed the fire control officer. Multiple threats neutralized, enemy formation responding with dispersal maneuvers. On the tactical display, the drone swarms separated into smaller elements, spreading wider to test the extent of defensive coverage while maintaining coordination through distributed command protocols. It was an adaptive response to the initial losses, demonstrating the sophisticated tactical programming these platforms employed. Sentinel-2 engaging Western elements, reported Martinez, who had deployed with the autonomous systems and now monitored their performance. Multiple threats neutralized, but they're pressing the attack with increased numbers. The battle expanded as more drone platforms joined the engagement, approaching from multiple vectors simultaneously. Both Sentinels continued to perform admirably, their targeting systems identifying and engaging the most significant threats with prioritized fire, while their electronic warfare suites countered attempted system intrusions. Conventional defensive systems added their firepower, creating a layered response that forced the attacking drones to navigate multiple threat environments. Human gunners lacked the precision of the autonomous systems, but contributed volume of fire that complicated the enemy's approach calculus. Yet the scale of the attack exceeded all previous engagements. Wave after wave of drone platforms pressed forward, absorbing losses while identifying and exploiting gaps in defensive coverage. Their tactical behavior showed clear learning from previous failures, avoiding patterns that had proven vulnerable while testing new approaches. They're probing for weaknesses in our sensor coverage, Harrington observed, noting how certain platforms maneuvered to exploit terrain features that might shield them from detection. Sentinel-1 adjusts sensor array orientation to compensate for the ridgeline blind spot. The autonomous system responded immediately, shifting its advanced sensor package to maintain coverage of the identified vulnerability. The adjustment allowed it to detect and engage several platforms attempting to exploit that approach vector, neutralizing them before they could penetrate the defensive perimeter. For 40 minutes, the battle raged with increasing intensity. The Sentinels continued to perform beyond expectations, their ammunition management algorithms conserving resources while maximizing effectiveness against priority threats. Yet the sheer volume of attacking platforms began to stress even their advanced capabilities. Sentinel-1 reporting ammunition at 40%, Martinez called out. Sentinel-2 at 35%. Enemy continues to commit additional platforms. The sustainability challenge was exactly what Harrington had anticipated in the system's design. Autonomous defenders with finite resources facing potentially unlimited attackers willing to accept losses to achieve objectives. It was a mathematical problem as much as a tactical one, with expendable resources balanced against time and defensive priorities. Implement ammunition conservation protocol. Bravo, Harrington directed. Focus on command platforms and delivery systems carrying precision munitions. Let conventional defenses handle the smaller reconnaissance drones. The adjustment allowed the Sentinels to focus their remaining ammunition on the most dangerous threats while preserving capacity for sustained operations. It was a classic combined arms approach adapted for autonomous warfare, each system addressing the threats it was best equipped to counter. As the battle continued, reports arrived from other bases across the sector. Similar attacks were underway at Condor, Ranger, and Outpost Victor, with varying intensity but consistent tactical patterns. The coordinated offensive intelligence had predicted was unfolding exactly as anticipated, testing American defensive capabilities across multiple locations simultaneously. At Echo, the attacking force began to show signs of tactical adaptation. Having failed to overwhelm the defensive screen through sheer numbers, they shifted to more sophisticated approaches. Electronic warfare intensified, targeting the Sentinel's sensor systems and communication links, while smaller platforms attempted to identify and exploit gaps in coverage. They're learning in real time, James observed, watching the tactical display update with each new approach vector, adapting their tactics based on what works and what fails. So must we, Harrington replied. Sentinel-1, implement countermeasure protocol Charlie. Sentinel-2, rotational coverage pattern Delta. The autonomous systems adjusted their operations according to these instructions, changing defensive postures to counter the evolving threat. Their ability to execute complex tactical adjustments without hesitation or confusion demonstrated the value of the extensive programming and training that had gone into their development. 2 hours into the engagement, a new threat emerged. Larger platforms appeared at the edge of sensor range, their signatures suggesting more substantial weapons capabilities than the smaller drones that had comprised the initial waves. Heavy attack platforms, Harrington identified immediately, likely carrying precision-guided munitions with standoff capability, priority targets for both Sentinels. The new platforms maintained distance, launching guided weapons from beyond the effective range of conventional defensive systems. Only the Sentinels, with their advanced targeting capabilities and counter-missile systems, could effectively engage these threats before their weapons reached the base. Sentinel-1 engaging standoff platforms, Martinez confirmed as the autonomous system shifted its attention to the new threat. Multiple missile launches detected, countermeasures engaging. The next minutes were critical as the Sentinel's defensive capabilities were tested against precision weapons. Their counter-missile systems performed admirably, intercepting multiple incoming projectiles before they could reach their targets. Yet the volume of fire challenged even their advanced capabilities, forcing them to prioritize threats that presented the greatest danger to personnel and critical infrastructure. Impact. Eastern perimeter, reported the damage control officer as one missile penetrated the defensive screen. Ammunition storage area hit, fire suppression systems activating. Casualty report from Checkpoint 3, added the medical coordinator. 2 wounded being transported to aid station. The successful penetration seemed to encourage the attacking force, which increased the volume of standoff attacks while continuing to probe for weaknesses with smaller platforms. It was a sophisticated combined arms approach, using multiple systems in coordinated fashion to stress defensive capabilities beyond their sustainable limits. Harrington studied the tactical display, noting how the enemy forces adjusted their approach to exploit identified vulnerabilities. Their learning curve was impressive, each failure informing subsequent attacks in a continuous adaptation cycle that mirrored the best human tactical thinking. They've identified Sentinel-2's ammunition constraints, he observed as attacking platforms concentrated on that sector. They're deliberately drawing fire to deplete its remaining capacity. Sentinel-2 reports 20% ammunition remaining, Martinez confirmed, primarily conservation for critical threat engagement. The situation was approaching a critical juncture. The defensive systems had performed admirably, preventing significant penetration despite the unprecedented scale of the attack. Yet sustainability remained the fundamental challenge. Finite ammunition and energy reserves against an enemy willing to commit seemingly unlimited platforms to achieve their objective. All bases reporting similar attack patterns, announced the communications officer. Condor, Ranger, and Victor all under heavy assault, Sentinel units performing effectively but approaching resource limitations. The coordinated offensive was exactly as intelligence had predicted, a theater-wide test of American defensive capabilities, particularly the newly deployed autonomous systems. The enemy was clearly willing to accept substantial losses to gather operational data and potentially achieve tactical victories that could influence strategic decisions about continued American presence in the region. As dawn approached, the attack intensity began to diminish. The enemy had committed hundreds of platforms across multiple bases, absorbing significant losses while gathering valuable intelligence on defensive capabilities and limitations. Their gradual disengagement suggested a planned operation reaching its conclusion rather than a defeated force in retreat. Enemy platforms withdrawing beyond engagement range, reported the sensor operator. Attack appears to be concluding across all targeted bases. The tactical display confirmed this assessment, showing the remaining drone platforms moving away from Echo's perimeter in coordinated fashion. Similar reports came in from other bases, indicating a theater-wide cessation of offensive operations. Maintain defensive posture, James ordered. This could be tactical repositioning rather than full withdrawal. It was a prudent caution, though Harrington suspected the attack had indeed concluded. The enemy had achieved their likely objectives, testing American defensive capabilities, particularly the Sentinel systems, while gathering valuable operational data on their performance, limitations, and tactical employment. As the sun rose over the Afghan mountains, damage assessment began. Echo had weathered the assault with relatively minimal impact. 2 wounded personnel, damage to an ammunition storage facility, and minor structural damage to perimeter defenses. Other bases reported similar outcomes, with Sentinel units proving decisive in preventing more significant casualties and infrastructure losses. Preliminary assessment indicates approximately 280 enemy platforms engaged across the sector, reported the intelligence officer. Estimated 175 neutralized, remainder withdrawn. Most significant autonomous attack recorded to date. The scale was sobering, suggesting industrial capacity and technical capability far beyond what conventional insurgents could field. This was state-level warfare being conducted through proxies, using Afghanistan as a testing ground for capabilities designed for potential peer conflict. Both Sentinel units performed beyond expectations, Martinez noted, reviewing the performance data. Ammunition expenditure was efficient, targeting priorities maintained according to protocols. Electronic warfare countermeasures successfully prevented system compromise. It was a validation of the Iron Shield concept, autonomous systems integrated with conventional forces, providing capabilities that neither could achieve independently. The Sentinels had demonstrated both their technical effectiveness and their tactical value, protecting American lives while countering sophisticated threats. As the immediate crisis passed, Harrington joined James on the observation post overlooking Echo's perimeter. The Sentinel units continued their vigilant patrol, mechanical and precise, while human soldiers conducted damage assessment and repair operations with the adaptability that defined their unique contribution. "We held," James said simply, "against the largest autonomous attack yet documented. We held." "We did," Harrington agreed. The integrated defense concept proved itself, machines and humans each contributing what they do best. But they'll be back with refined tactics and increased resources. "And we'll be better prepared," James replied with confidence. "Each engagement teaches us as much as it teaches them. The Sentinel's performance data will inform improvements to the next units deployed, just as our tactical adjustments will enhance future defensive operations." It was the essence of military adaptation, learning from each engagement, refining capabilities and tactics, preparing for the next challenge with improved tools and understanding. Iron Shield had passed its most significant test, but the evolution of autonomous warfare was just beginning. 3 days later, Harrington received orders to return to Aberdeen. The Pentagon had approved expedited production of 50 additional Sentinel units based on the system's performance during the coordinated attacks. His experience was needed to refine the training program and tactical doctrine based on operational lessons learned. Before departing, he conducted a final briefing with commanders from across the northeastern sector, sharing insights and establishing protocols for ongoing tactical coordination. The 8 deployed Sentinel units would remain in place, with additional systems joining them as production allowed, creating an increasingly robust defensive network. His last conversation with James occurred as he prepared to board the transport aircraft. They stood apart from the other personnel, father and son, sharing a rare moment of privacy amid the constant activity of a forward operating base. "The men have started calling the defensive network Iron Shield," James mentioned with a slight smile. "They don't know that's the project's official designation. Just felt it captured what these systems represent: protection, strength, reliability." "Appropriate," Harrington acknowledged. "Though the real shield isn't the technology, it's the integration of machine capability with human judgment, neither complete without the other." James nodded his understanding. It was the principle Harrington had emphasized throughout the project's development: autonomous systems as partners rather than replacements, extending human capabilities while preserving the moral judgment and contextual understanding that defined ethical warfare. "We're entering a new era," Harrington continued. "Autonomous systems will transform how we fight, just as aircraft, tanks, and precision munitions did in previous generations. But the core responsibility remains with the humans who employ these technologies to ensure they serve ethical purposes, protect those who serve, and achieve legitimate military objectives. I understand, James assured him, and I'll make sure my men do too. The machines may stand guard, but we remain the guardians of what matters most. As the transport aircraft lifted away from Echo, Harrington watched the base recede beneath him. The Sentinel units were visible at the perimeter, mechanical sentinels protecting American forces against evolving threats. Beside them stood human soldiers, the essential partners in this emerging domain of warfare, contributing the judgment, adaptability, and moral understanding that no algorithm could replicate. The journey that had begun with skepticism had led to a new understanding, not of machines replacing humans, but of a partnership that preserved what was best in both. Iron Shield had proven its worth in combat, protecting American lives while demonstrating that technological innovation could enhance rather than diminish the human element in warfare. Whatever challenges lay ahead in the continuing evolution of autonomous systems, Harrington was confident that the principles they'd established would endure. Machines extending human capability rather than replacing human judgment. Technology serving ethical purposes rather than dictating military choices. Innovation preserving lives rather than merely improving lethality. It was a legacy worthy of his final mission, a shield forged from both steel and spirit, protecting those who served while preserving the values that gave their service meaning.